Chapter 36. 1. Absolute and instantaneous kill. Tisk, can I still choose to not go? Yu Xiaoning, it's really a mystery how I came to become friends with you. Yan Ning Luo swept her gaze over her, and then went on to completely disregard her presence, before climbing into the horse carriage. Yu Xiaoning was taken aback, before she slyly shot her third brother a smug look, her eyes saying, "How? Do you concede?" Yu Jingzhua shrugged his shoulders helplessly. "Fine. Losers weepers. I'll give you that map of the mountains of heaven and earth when we get back." The two of them exchanged a series of meaningful glances with each other before they then climbed into the horse carriage one after another. Inside the carriage, Xianyuan Che and Yan Ning Luo were seated on one side each, neither of them saying a word, a rare moment of quiet and tranquility between those two. Yu Jingzhua and Yu Xiaoning looked at each other and they saw surprise in the other person's eyes. When those two are not trading barbs with their tongues, they are actually rather compatible. The New Moon Lake was situated in the central region of the Green Wave Kingdom, a newer and slightly more well-known place of interest to travel to, where the water presented itself to be faintly blue with many colorful fishes swimming within, a breathtaking sight. Many picturesque pleasure boats and other vessels dotted over the lake's surface, pairs of lovebirds and passing merchants, all kinds of people. When they reached their destination, Yu Jingzhua came down from the carriage first, to hold the curtain up to allow the two young ladies to get off. Yan Ning Luo did not often show herself in public, but in the Green Wave Kingdom, there were few people who did not know her. Hence at the moment she stepped off the carriage, a series of collective gasps immediately sounded all around them. "It's Princess Ning Feng. Ah! Ah! It's really her. Heavens, she's really so beautiful. I did not think that it will be exactly like what the rumors say. She's just like a goddess. She's the greatest beauty of all indeed. Hearing it 100 times cannot compare to seeing it with your own eyes. That elegant air and grace is absolutely unmatched. And also the left Prime Minister's daughter, Yu Xiaoning. Yu Xiaoning is the Green Wave Kingdom's most talented woman, and I had not thought that she would also possess such outstanding looks as well. She's so adorable, and so very pretty. The capital city's two great beauties have actually come out together today. It is a great day today indeed. The Crown Prince has come here as well. My sweet heavens. The New Moon Lake is receiving so many great big entities today. Yu Jingzhua was always gallivanting around outside and everyone knew who he was, so he played just an accessory role here this time, without much people paying all that much attention. He also had his own private pleasure boat here and he had already arranged for people to have it ready by the shore. When they saw him coming, they immediately came forward in greeting. "Young master, everything is ready. This way please." The man gestured respectfully in invitation. Yu Jingzhua walked up front to take the lead as he climbed into the boat, with Xianyuan Che following right behind. Yu Xiaoning and Yan Ning Luo were last to board. The pleasure boat then slowed moved out. On the boat, there was everything from fine wine to delicious food, entertainers playing zither on one side, their long slender fingers picking out melodious tunes from their instruments. "Let's all have a seat." Yu Jingzhua was the host, and he began to show hospitality to his guests, attending to their needs. It was Yu Xiaoning's first time here and when she saw the luxurious fittings on the pleasure boat with its exquisite wine cups and jade ornaments, she could not help but to shake her head and say while clicking her tongue, "Third brother, this pleasure boat of yours is not just commonly luxurious. I don't think you can achieve such ostentatiousness without a few million taels at least." Haha. Ning Ning really knows her stuff. You can tell with just one glance. Unlike some other people, who were actually suspecting that these things are counterfeit. Yu Jingzhua said with an easy laugh. "TSK. Did you think I was praising you? Can anyone else be as big a spendthrift as you? If you did not have that little gigolo brothel sustaining your expenditure, you will be thrown out of the house to sleep on the streets sooner or later. Yu Xiaoning spat disdainfully, dispensing with all courtesy. The latter then glared angrily with his eyes widened. You impudent lass, is this any way to talk to your elder brother? No respect at all. If I end up spending all my money, I will then stick myself onto you. Chapter 36. 2. Absolute and instantaneous kill. Which family's elder brother could possibly be this thick-skinned and shameless? Yu Xiaoning pouted, not wanting to bother about him. Did we come out today just to hear the two of you squabble? Yan Ning Luo was getting impatient from hearing their quarrel, and she opened her mouth to interrupt icily. The two siblings immediately clamped their mouths shut, but they immediately discovered something strange in the very next second. The Crown Prince and Yan Ning Luo today. They had really gotten along so peacefully for such a long period. From the time that they had come down from the horse carriage till now, at least an hour must have passed. Those two there were being rather unusual today. In another few days, the Water Edge Kingdom's emissaries will be arriving, and it has already been confirmed that the Duke of Vast Seas will be coming. Yu Jingzhuo cleared his throat before he said, to dispel the awkward atmosphere a little. I would think that they are not coming here with friendly intentions. Ha! When was he ever capable of friendly intentions? That devil! He only came here once 7 years ago and he destroyed half of this lady's assets. Yu Xiaoning complained as she picked up a fresh red fruit, and sinking her teeth into it vehemently to vent her frustration. Xianyuan Che glanced at her and then slowly opened his mouth to say, the Duke of Vast Seas was already deep and unfathomable 7 years ago. With these 7 years that have passed, it is not known what kind of a realm he could have reached. But what is certain is that upon this lands, I do not think that anyone is his match. Sigh. I wonder. How many generations worth of fortitude the Water Edge must have kept for the heavens to bless them with such an extraordinary figure to descend upon their lands. Yu Jingzhuo lamented with a sigh. Hearing them all discussing about the Duke of Vast Seas, Yan Ning Luo furrowed up her brows. Is that person really that powerful? Xianyuan Che had always been proud and aloof, and if even he was saying that, that person must really be very strong indeed. When the others heard her ask that, they were all immediately taken aback before remembering back in those years, Yan Ning Luo had been in seclusion within the Faint Mist sect, engaged in closed-door cultivation with their sect leader, and was not aware of anything that happened in the outside world at that time. Yu Jingzhuo was just about to speak when the deck of the pleasure boat suddenly lurched violently, and the group of people almost tumbled out of the boat. Fortunately they were all people of cultivation and they quickly steadied themselves. What happened? Yu Jingzhuo roared loudly towards the outside in displeasure. But even after several moments had passed, no one answered him. Yu Jingzhuo's brows creased together and he stood up to walk outside, but was then met with the sight of the two attendants from before fallen to the deck, blood trickling out from the corners of their mouths, the shade of their faces an ugly color. He crouched down and checked the pulse one of the men at his neck. He was killed by a powerful force that snapped his meridians. And at that moment, the lake's surface had erupted into a chaotic mess. It was clear that not only their boat had people wounded or killed. Third brother, what is happening outside? Seeing that there was no response from him for so long, Yu Xiaoning voiced out to ask. Ning Ning, all of you are not to come out. Yu Jingzhuo rushed inside to say. His gaze then quickly scanned across the surface of the vast lake in search, to quickly discover that there seemed to be a commotion upon the largest pleasure boat on the lake, and the upheaval seemed to be rather violent. Thereafter, a black shadow then came flying out from that boat to crash into the lake's surface, the blue water that sprayed up with that splash dyed the color of blood. Humph! Overconfident fool. A figure in light blue suddenly appeared in his sight, the head of smooth black hair draped over the back, with wisps of blue strands hidden within, just faintly visible. Yu Jingzhuo narrowed his eyes. That young lady did not look to be from the Green Wave Kingdom. On the opposite bank, several more black shadowy figures suddenly appeared, treading over the water's surface as they approaching the boat, the tips of their toes just lightly touching the water, but were able to stand steadily on top without sinking. Yu Jingzhua's eyes widened as he stared. Every single one of those people seemed hold cultivation levels above his, like they were all well-trained members from an organization of assassins. These people are heavenly grade assassins from the Carefree Valley. It was not known from when Shenyuan Che had come out from inside, and then went on to say in a deep voice as he looked at the people standing upon the lake's surface. Chapter 36. 3. Absolute and instantaneous kill. Yu Jingzhua's eyes narrowed slightly. The Carefree Valley was last in rank among the three great sects, but the Assassins' Union among them was a faction the other two sects could never hope to match. They were segregated into 4 grades. The Golden Emblem Assassin, the Heavenly Grade Assassin, the Mystical Grade Assassin, and the Yellow Grade Assassin. Judging by the cultivation of these people, where they were able to stand upon the water's surface and not sink for long periods, it could be seen that they should be some of the top few pugilists among the heaven-grade assassins. But for the Carefree Valley to mobilize such a great number of assassins, who were they seeking to kill? Weren't they mobilizing too big a force here? It must be known that whenever they sent out just 2 assassins, it would already show that the target was no ordinary target. But before their eyes, they could see at least 20 people here. And the young lady in blue standing out there on that boat, was Yuxin Yen. 2 days ago, she had already pleaded with Qin Yili to bring her here to the Green Wave Kingdom. Never had she expected that they had just reached, they had immediately met people who were out to spoil the mood. Yuxin Yan's face was filled with displeasure. Who sent you here? To think that you will have the temerity to want to assassinate us, do you know who we are? Upon saying that, she did not wait for all those men to reply, but to raise up a finger lightly. Thereafter, the light blue waters of the lake became as if it was lead, to rise and surge towards her palm, forming into a great ball of water that glowed faintly with lightning. In the next second, the young lady's gaze flashed icily, and she detonated the ball of water viciously. An enormous torrential wave rose up from the surface of the lake, an impossibly shocking scene. All the black-robed men hastily retreated, and as they were all well-trained assassins, they did not show the slightest bit of panic. They summoned their spirit powers and put up their defenses, the lake's surface immediately lighting up with spirit power glows in myriad colors, making for a breathtakingly beautiful sight. Yu Jingzhua stared in shock, his eyes growing wider, where he and Shenyuan Che then summoned up their powers to steady their own boat. How powerful! The Water Edge Kingdom's 9th princess. The two of them spoke at the same time. Similarly seeing the shock in each other's eyes. The people from the Water Edge Kingdom had arrived and not a single person knew about it at all. Then, within that large pleasure boat, the person who still had not made an appearance would surely be Xin Yen, come inside. A male voice so cold it seeped into one's bones sounded with a powerful oppressive aura, that struck violently at every one of those men's hearts. The black-robed assassins who had still been standing strong were immediately struck till they all vomited out a mouthful of blood by that oppressive aura. Xin Yen pouted her lips when she heard that, but retracted her attack and went walking inside the pleasure boat unhappily. Big brother Yili, why won't you let me fight them? It will dirty your hands. Qin Yili said indifferently, his dark green eyes sinister and chilly. Permeating through the walls of the pleasure boat, an invisible force of power lashed out. Originating from the largest pleasure boat in the center of the New Moon Lake, the waters of the lake was visibly freezing over with a thick layer of ice, gradually spreading out at a very fast speed. The faces of the assassins showed shock and terror and they turned around quickly to fly away. Unfortunately the speed of the ice forming was too fast and it froze the men within it. The sun's rays shone upon the people inside the ice, which made for an oddly beauty sight. In the next second, it was suddenly like the fleeting bloom of a night cactus, wilting after it shows its beautiful blossom, where the ice cracked and broke, into fist-sized ice pieces as they fell. The frozen lake's surface was restored to its original state in moments, the varied color fishes chasing each other merrily in the waters, happy as can be. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The lake's water was clear and pristine, like nothing had ever happened before. Yu Jingjue and Xianyuan Che was so stunned by the scene that they were not able to even say a word for a long while. That person had not even shown himself and he had already unleashed such a formidable strike. Just what kind of a terrifying level has he reached? Inside the pleasure boat, Yan Ning Luo's eyes were lowered, her fists tightly clenched up. It's him. Chapter 37. 1. Afterlife Loft. That person's voice was one that she remembered. No matter how much time passed, she would never forget this voice. Yan Ning Luo stood up all of a sudden, and walked outside under Yu Xiaoning's completely stunned gaze. Outside, Yu Jingjue and Xianyuan Che were looking at each other in dismay, looking like they did not dare to believe their own eyes. Where is he? Yan Ning Luo's face actually sounded a little flustered. Who? Yu Jingjue's face was one of bewilderment. The person who just spoke. Yan Ning Luo's voice suddenly turned shrill. That man who released that oppressive aura. Where is he? Yu Jingjue then managed to recover his senses and answered, they disappeared all of a sudden, together with that enormous pleasure boat. They must have employed some special technique to move themselves. Yan Ning Luo's gaze then dimmed in that instant. That person is gone again. Will she never see him again? The man she had kept on her mind for 8 long years. Xianyuan Che had naturally noticed the highly agitated emotions she had just shown, and she had then suddenly turned depressed right after. He then opened his mouth to say, you hold strong interest towards the Duke of Vast Seas. What about the Duke of Vast Seas? Yan Ning Luo furrowed up her brows. What does this have to do with the Duke of Vast Seas? Xianyuan Che then laughed. That depressed look you are showing. The man inside that pleasure boat earlier is the Duke of Vast Seas. He has come to the Green Wave Kingdom ahead of time, but he did not reveal himself. But we did see the 9th princess. What? Yan Ning Luo stared with her eyes wide in shock. He is actually the legendary Duke of Vast Seas. Hey, did ya hear? Something momentous happened at the New Moon Lake yesterday. What happened? Quite a number of people went to the lake for leisure yesterday, and they suddenly saw a great number of black-robed assassins appear, all of them with highly profound cultivation. A good number of people were hurt. Such a thing really happened? What could possibly draw so many assassins there? I heard that they were there to kill one man, but he was just too powerful. Without even showing his face, he completely decimated all those highly skilled assassins with just one move. You just can't imagine just how grand that scene was. The vast New Moon Lake froze over entirely and those assassins were turned into human popsicles. After the ice broke and crumbled, there wasn't even pulp left of those killers. It was so pitiful. One can actually possess such terrifying power. I do not think that anyone across these lands could possibly hold such heaven-defying power at all. Could it possibly be someone from foreign lands? Over a leisurely cup of tea after their meal, many people sat together to discuss about the incident that occurred at the New Moon Lake. The spirit sap that he herb beds needs had run out, and Qing Yu had just come out to purchase some when she overheard the strange incident people were chattering about. Her brows unconsciously raised up upon hearing about such an interesting incident. A pity she had not been there, or she would have been able to witness a good bout between highly skilled pugilists. But, that person who just went ahead to freeze the entire lake was really brutal and crude though. To kill his enemies in just one stroke, what kind of a sense of satisfaction could one get from that? If it were her, she might have slowly tortured her opponents. That would then be interesting, you know. That person's methods. Why does it feel so familiar? Her slender fingers cradling her chin, her eyes narrowed as she mumbled softly to herself. The surface of the New Moon Lake was extremely vast. To want to freeze the entire lake, it was not a feat any ordinary person was capable of accomplishing. According to the lucky survivors who were present, the ice was at least 10 feet thick, which would be able to hold up even 100 people without cracking. It was also able to freeze instantly and melt instantly, according to that person's will. Unless one had cultivated a secret technique to its pinnacle, otherwise it would be difficult to control it, as the slightest missteps might cause one to suffer backlash. Chapter 37. 2. Afterlife Loft. Of course she was not about to believe that anyone would readily face the risk of backlash just to show off before people, that created such a big commotion. Unless that person was already a terrifyingly powerful entity. Qingyu furrowed her brows to think about it for a while and finally shook her head in the end. I should just forget about it all. I am thinking too much into it. From the time she came to this other world, together with the years that she wandered and roamed around as a spirit body, even she could not remember how long it had been. Not to mention after she entered this young lady's body, another 6 years had passed. As for that fella, even if he was not yet dead, it was thought that he would be incredibly old already. Thinking that that person might now have a full white beard, his face old and haggard, Qingyu could not help but laugh aloud. She had changed into another disguise when she came out this time. Where she had merely slightly altered her looks before, her countenance had still been much too attractive, and even when she dressed herself up as a male, she still drew countless gazes onto herself. This time, she went ahead to darken her complexion and thickened her eyebrows greatly, making herself look a lot more handsome looking but less eye-catching, which would attract a little less attention. After making her purchases, she immediately left. Her gaze drifted over to glance at the gathered cloud loft a moment and saw that its doors were tightly shut, the building already emptied out. Upon the steps in front, an old man in grey sat, hugging his arms in front of him as he dozed, his mouth seemingly muttering something intermittently. Qingyu raised an eyebrow quizzically and then paid him no mind before turning around to walk away. Behind her, it was not known when the grey-robed old man had opened his eyes, though they did not show the slightest bit of grogginess despite having just woken up, staring straight at that petite back, and a sharp glint flashed in those eyes. The New Moon Lake was a famous place of interest for leisure. And because of that, the place also had a most regal and luxurious inn there, called the Afterlife Loft. But do not be taken aback by the name of the inn. The reason the place was named the Afterlife Loft was because of a kind of wine they had at this place. The name of that wine was called Afterlife's Water. Though it's called water, it was in fact wine. But it was not the same as regular wine, as it did not feel like it would pack the same kind of strong and dominating wallop in the beginning. When it first entered the mouth, it was as tasteless and bland as water, but once you drank a few cups, before one could react, its powerful kick would strike, which would be strong enough to even knock out a cow. Drinking the Afterlife's water would keep one drunk for 3 days and 3 nights, and when one awoke from it, one would feel like one had awoken to a new life, all the past suffering and worries completely and cleanly forgotten. This was considered to be another one of its amazing attributes, but unfortunately the secret recipe was not shared, and you will only be able to find it at the Afterlife Loft. Countless people have come to this place due to its reputation just to have a taste of this Afterlife's water. And this mysterious top inn throughout the lands, was located at the border of the Green Wave Kingdom. Besides lodging and meals, there were also many other places of interest for entertainment. There's an auction house, a fighting arena, and also the more light-hearted song and dance performances, scholarly pursuits like poetry and paintings, catering to all kinds of indulgences. Gathered inside the ground floor's main hall, would mainly be people of the pugilist world, common riffraffs, a medley of good and evil people. The Afterlife Loft had a total of 9 levels. The first 5 levels were open to the public masses, while the further few levels were places that mere money alone would not be able to buy you entry. It was reserved only for people of extraordinary identities, people with powerful entities and backing that would be able to enter. But regardless which level it was, to want to even stay in there, one would not be able to even step inside without holding at least 10,000 taels of silver. Not only was the Afterlife Loft different from the other inns, all its charges were exorbitantly high. Hence those people who were feeling embarrassed in their pouches would mostly remain only on the ground level, where the charges were lowest, but was most crowded. To be able to set foot inside the Afterlife Loft, they were all not just ordinary people, and just being in there was a status symbol by itself. But, because of all kinds of minor and petty things, fights often broke out between its patrons on a daily basis. Chapter 37. 2. Afterlife Loft. There was always a death occurring in that place every single day. Patrons were not allowed to stir up trouble inside the Afterlife Loft or they would be banned from setting foot in that place for life. But those people who got into a fight would make a date to slug it out in the arena. They were a rash and hot-blooded bunch, where they would sign a death indemnity, throwing their lives to the wind. In these lands where the mighty reigned supreme, human lives were cheap. Without power, death awaited. There were also fugitives on the run who were on the wanted list. They had done everything within their means to gather a large amount of money to come into the Afterlife Loft, just to remain alive. Because the Afterlife Loft had a rule that people within their premises would be protected. The people in pursuit were helplessly fearful of the Afterlife Loft's power and influence, and no one dared to come into the Afterlife Loft to arrest the fugitives, unable to do anything but to keep endless watch to wait for the fugitives to come out on their own. And inversely, as long as they did not come out from the Afterlife Loft, the fugitives would enjoy the protection upon their lives. Right at that moment, a horse carriage slowly pulled up in front of its main doors. A sharp-eyed waiter immediately went up in welcome, as the attractive youth who drove the coach lifted the horse carriage's curtain, to announce respectfully, "My lord, young Miss 9, we've reached." A slender and porcelain white hand stretched out from inside the carriage, and right thereafter, a blue figure then stepped out. Exquisite and peerlessly beautiful facial features, a pair of clear eyes as blue as the color of the sky that were enchantingly spirited, her head of hip-length hair weaved into many tiny braids, wisps of blue locks falling from her temples, that gave the person an exotic charm. Her entire being exuded a regal air, and it was clear from just one glance that she held an extraordinary identity. Following right behind, was a tall slender-framed man. An ink-colored robe upon his body, and as he came off the carriage, his head of flowy silver locks cascading down made him look indescribably bewitching. That man was wearing a ghastly wolf-shaped mask, revealing only a pair of sinisterly green eyes and that stalwart jawline that was hard as steel. The moment he stepped off, the irresistible aura emanating from him attracted the attention of almost everyone inside the main hall. "His hair, why is it that color?" someone asked the person beside him in a hushed whisper. "It's probably because he's from another kingdom. I've heard that there are many people who do not look at all like us in the other kingdoms, people with eyes and hair of an unusual color." "I see. That lady is rather beautiful. But as for that man, it looks like he's not to be trifled with. Hard and icy cold. How could that woman bear to stand there with him?" "Shoo, keep your voice down." Uxin Yen looked at the various gazes surrounding them and her brows creased up together in disgust. "What's this? How dare they gaze upon Big Brother Yili like they were looking at a monster? What an impudent bunch." Qin Yili had long been used to such gazes being thrown his way, and with his eyes not wavering in the least, he walked over to the front desk right in the middle, his slender fingers placing a teardrop-shaped crystal upon it. The eyes of the young man behind the desk immediately narrowed and he quickly came walking out to front to say respectfully, "The rooms have already been prepared. It's on the 8th floor, the Water Moon Chamber. Please come with me." Qin Yili acknowledged indifferently and then went walking behind the man to go inside, where Uxin Yen and Ah Jin then followed behind. Till the group could no longer be seen, the main hall then suddenly exploded. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Oh hell, did I not hear that right? The 8th floor. What kind of a background is that man from? Till now, the most distinguished guest they've had only stayed up till the 6th floor. But this man has gone straight up to the 8th floor. The hospitality and face being shown to him is greater than that extended to our Green Wave Kingdom's emperor himself. Judging from the air and demeanor of that man, he must be someone in a very high position. Hey, did any of you manage to get a glimpse of that crystal he pulled out earlier? I saw it. So what? Chapter 38. 1. This is the person in your heart. That isn't just any regular crystal stone. That is the full-grade ferocious beast, Hurricane Condor's core crystal. Gasp. Is that true? The Hurricane Condor is a full-grade ferocious beast. Many a number of powerful pugilists have given up their lives under its talons, and you say that was its core crystal. Why would I lie to you for? I specialize in collecting these beast-type crystal cores and I immediately recognized it the moment I laid my eyes on it. That is just absolutely heaven-defying. Really wonder who he is. If not for the fact that looks so terrifying, I would have really liked to go up to him and make his acquaintance. To have a friend like that, it'll be a proud thing just telling people about it. You. Ha ha ha. Just forget it. A nobody like you wants to befriend that powerful entity? Stop pulling my leg. That's so true. Ha ha ha. The main hall exploded into a bout of raucous laughter, the atmosphere becoming exceptionally boisterous. On the 8th floor, there were 2 independent courtyards. One was the Water Moon Chambers, the other, Fragrance Dome Abode. These 2 little courtyards were large, with 3 or 4 rooms each inside. The young man leading them brought the guests in and turned around to bow at the waist as he said, "The Water Moon Chambers will have everything you'll need inside and we've prepared it all for you. If there is anything else you need, you will only need to infuse your spirit power into this and I will be here to assist shortly." The young man said and handed a red jade token to Qin Yili. Ah Jin reacted and accepted the jade token as he said, "Thank you. You may carry on with your other duties." The young man nodded, and then retreated his way out. "Big brother Yili, why are we here?" It was only at that moment that Yuxian Yen voiced her doubts out aloud. Although this was the best in these lands had to offer, but Qin Yili was not the type of person who coveted such leisurely pleasures. When she brought up that question, even Ah Jin who had served them for many years was looking rather puzzled as well. "They're here." Qin Yili sat upon a chair and had his eyes raised to look outside, suddenly making that short statement. "What?" Yuxian Li was taken aback. But in the very next second, she saw several figures walking towards them. The footsteps of white-robed man leading the group was extremely strange where his figure was a blur as he moved, appearing right before them in a blink. "A guest has come from afar. We're late in offering our respect." The white-robed man had his hand clasped over his fist, his eyes tinged with smiles. His pair of charming and expressive eyes seemed to have gathered the stars in the sky, to the extent they could even be said to be amorous and heart-stirring. Yuxian Yan's blue eyes were wide as she started. In all her years till now, this was the first time she was seeing someone that could carry pure white robes to look so charming and dashing. And it was even worn upon a man. "This little beauty here, why are you looking at me like this?" The man's gaze turned slightly, his gentle calming tone of voice undulating, highly captivating. A mere moments of weak-mindedness very nearly had Yuxian Yen hooked as the corners of her mouth twitched slightly. "Wearing those white clothes really does no justice to your being. A man with feminine looks, bewitching and alluring. Even as a woman, she was feeling inferior. That's enough. Stop teasing her already." Qin Yili shot the white-robed man an expressionless glance, and the man then retracted that teasing look on his face while he went on to the side to find himself a seat. He poured out a cup of tea for himself and then took a sip. "I heard about the assassination attempt on your life. That bunch of fools are going to get themselves killed sooner or later." The man said with stiffened lips, and then lifted his eyes up to say, "You do not have to take me into account when you strike them. Although I was once one of their members, but I have come out from there and am no longer linked to them. They were courting their own deaths and they cannot blame anyone for that. That is not what I wanted to talk about. As I thought, I knew that you aren't really that concerned about me. Concerned about you? Qin Yi Li arched up an eyebrow. Never before. Chapter 38. 2. This is the person in your heart. Uxin Yen looked at the white-robed man's highly mournful look and could not help but burst out. Pfft. Qin Yi Li completely ignored the man's aggrieved eyes and opened his mouth to say to him, I want you to help me look into someone. The man then looked at Qin Yi Li in surprise. Look into someone? Who could have stepped on your tail? Are you here to seek vengeance? Qin Yi Li did not respond but just stretched his hand out, a rather unique-looking portrait scroll suddenly appearing in his palm, which Qin Yi Li then handed to the man. Help me look for the person in the painting. Hearing that, the man took the painting and then slowly unfurled the scroll, his charming and alluring eyes widening. A woman? With that loud cry, it immediately drew the eyes of Uxin Yen and Jin to turn over towards him. They saw that the woman in the portrait was dressed in white formidable-looking attire, wrapped around a curvy slender waist, her long hair bound up high at the top of her head with a hair ribbon, with several strands hanging down over the side at the temples, her arms crossed as she leaned against a tree, her stance languidly indolent. Her facial features were delicately exquisite, exceptional and outstanding looking. The one thing that was most attractive was that pair of long up-slanted eyes that looked highly intelligent and crafty as a fox, the lifted ends of the eyes exceptionally alluring. The edges of her faintly pink lips were slightly curled up, tinged with a faint playful smile. She seemed to be looking at something focusedly, but was completely unaware that someone else was staring at her so intensively. The portrait depicted everything to the finest detail, especially that woman, where even her demeanor was so well captured and lifelike. It was clear to see that the artist's skills was exceedingly superb. Having served Qin Yi Li for such a long time, Jin had naturally known that Qin Yi Li knew how to paint. However, what he was not aware of was when Qin Yi Li had drawn such a beautiful portrait. Hence, at this moment, he was greatly surprised. What shocked Uxin Yen? Why, Big Brother Yi Li, whom she knew was a man who always kept his distance away from all beings of the female species, would paint a portrait of a woman. And one she could tell with just one glance, that a lot of effort had been put into it. The fact that she was able to speak to Big Brother Yi Li, and come to become close to him, was only because she had always stuck herself to him since she was very young. Additionally, it was also because of his friendship with her royal brother, that she could come to be so close to him at all. So, at that moment, she could not help but become very curious. Who is that person in the painting? Uxin Yen was never a person who could keep her thoughts to herself. As that thought came into her mind, she then asked it out aloud, Big Brother Yi Li, who is she? That was similarly the question Jin and the white-robed man had in mind. Qin Yi Li looked at the person in the painting and his gaze softened quite a bit. She is someone very important. Once those words came out, several people were taken aback with shock. Qin Yi Li turned his eyes away and looked at the white-robed man. She could possibly have altered her looks, but that pair of eyes she has isn't what normal people can possess. Look out for people with such eyes, and she also possesses a unique air about her. If you've seen her once, you will never forget it. That magical. The white-robed man pursed up his lips thoughtfully. I've never seen you like this when you speak. Could she possibly be the lady in your heart? And she's really beautiful looking. Her eyes are even more alluring than mine. Fine. I won't say anything more. How petty. I was only taking a closer look. The white-robed man saw Qin Yi Li keeping the portrait, and he could not help but complain. I'll leave it to you. Qin Yi Li's voice was low and a little hoarse, his dark green eyes serious, and seemingly tinged with a hint of plea. The white-robed man was startled. It seemed to be the first time he was seeing this man show such a demeanor, that was like a certain kind of emotion called vulnerability, and the white-robed man's thin lips curled up slightly. "All right, I did not say I wouldn't help you. We've been friends for so many years, and it's just to locate a person." "Thanks." Qin Yili nodded. Chapter 38. 3. This is the person in your heart. All right then. You all must be tired traveling all the way here, and I should not disturb you any longer. Get some good rest. The white-robed man said with a smile, and then stood up. With the same strange skill he showed when he appeared earlier, the 10 steps distance to the door seemed to only require a single step from him to traverse, before he disappeared in a blink, together with all the others with him. That person is so powerful. Ah, Jean said in awe. Big Brother Yili, was that a friend of yours? Wuxia Yen just remembered that he had immediately mentioned about the assassination attempt the moment he came in. How is he related to those assassins? Qin Yili looked at her a moment and then slowly said, he is the godson of the Carefree Valley's Valley Chief, but he distanced himself from the place when he left a few years ago. This Afterlife Loft is opened by him. Wuxia Yen blinked her eyes in amazement. Wow, that's amazing. He is the owner of the place. His real identity is that he's the young lord of one of the 4 great family clans in the White Fan lands. Although he has acknowledged his roots and ancestors to a faction, his uninhibited personality still has him running between 2 separate different lands. His background is indeed rather illustrious. Wuxia Yen nodded her head, only half comprehending what has been said, but what she was more curious about was. The deep blue eyes swiveled. Big Brother Yili, is that big sister really the woman of your heart? Why haven't I heard you mention her before? The light in Qin Yili's eyes then dimmed. She died. Wuxia Yan's eyes widened, like she had not expected to receive such a response, and she bit her lip to say guiltily, I'm sorry. I didn't know. She died before, but she is still alive in this world. Wuxia Yen did not know how to react for a moment and then suddenly recalled. Her royal brother had told her that Big Brother Yili was a man from another world, who descended upon these lands 20 years ago. Then that means the woman would definitely be his lover from the previous he came from. With that thought in mind, she could not help but become even more curious. To be able to move Big Brother Yili's heart, who was a man that was so cold but frightfully powerful, that woman must be highly amazing as well. Cloud Heaven was not all that peaceful recently. Throughout the ages, regardless whether it was in the high-level or the low-level lands, bloodshed, slaughter, and the seizure of territories was law that remained unchanged. But it was just that the scuffles and scrimmages in the lower-level lands were more brutal and cruel in Cloud Heaven. The Dark Legion had been relentlessly persecuted by the various powers for close to the past 100 years, and their situation had grown to be highly precarious. Especially for the Hunters Guild, they were like demons after their lives, sinking their teeth relentlessly into the people of the Dark Legion. The moment they found any sign of the Dark Legion's people, they would rather kill 1,000 innocents than to let one go. The reason for that merciless pursuit and persecution was because the top man of the Hunters Guild was once from the Dark Legion who did not manage to win the favor of the Dark Lord, and was even once ridiculed and scorned by him. That caused his high ego to be severely humiliated, and he deserted the Dark Legion and set up the Hunters Guild, vowing to stand against the Dark Legion his entire life. Though the face of the accused who came to hear about that had no recollection of it at all. Have I really ridiculed and poured scorn on anybody before? Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. The mass of people around him could only look up into the sky in speechlessness. My lord, not only have you done that, it was definitely more than once, you know. What makes it even more infuriating is that you have clearly done it before and you are acting like you're completely innocent and have forgotten cleanly about it. Back then, Luo Junyao was not so restrained and low profile. He was the Dark Lord that was the epitome of arrogance and tyranny, and the one thing that everyone knew him for was, not only was he unbelievably arrogant, he had an extremely venomous tongue, where a light and casual statement from him could humiliate someone so much they wished they would just die on the spot. Using Bai Ji Yan's words, it would be, if the day comes when the various powers collide, the Dark Legion would not need a single soldier or footman, but with just the Dark Lord's tongue alone, they would be invincible. Chapter 39. 1. A valiant woman. Ever since he was poisoned, it had been many years since Lu Junyao had come back to these lands, causing many people to think that the Lord of the Dark Legion had fallen into decline. However, the moment he returned, he came back so explosively it rocked the entire cloud heaven. The disciples of the Dark Legion that had scattered and dispersed to various corners of cloud heaven had immediately felt the summon in their souls the moment their king returned, with every single one of them surging in a beeline towards the call. It was a magnificent and grand sight. Having barely scraped and cowered through, and living out such a miserable existence, their patience was finally being rewarded. Their peerlessly powerful king had come back and no one would dare bully them again. Any members of the Hunters Guild they encountered along the way were all cut down and slaughtered without exception. It was as if the people of the Dark Legion had suddenly been boosted by having taken some kind of divine elixir. Their cultivation increased more than a little, that had the members of the Hunters Guild frightened into fleeing from them. Several of the Hunters Guild's established bases were quickly overrun, where their members crawled and scraped their way out from their lairs in escape. Damn it! Those people from the Dark Legion have absolutely gone berserk. With all the earth-shattering changes happening everywhere outside, the Dark Legion's main headquarters was unbelievably peaceful. Besides the unrestrainable excitement all the dark-robed men were feeling, everything else could be considered to be rather harmonious. Darn it! Why hasn't it woken up? Meiji's enchanting face did not show her usual teasing smile, but had an expression of pain and rage. That damned Hunters Guild, this woman here will definitely trash up your nest one day. A tall man was lying on the bed, his face outstandingly good-looking, but his eyes were tightly shut, his lips a pale white, looking rather lifeless. Having never seen him looking so weak and frail, Meiji was so filled with rage she was about to turn around and leave. Hey, where are you going? Bai Ji Yan was quick enough to stop her. Haven't I already told you? His body is rather unique, and his recovery will be a little slow. Moreover, his immunity against poison is rather weak, and he was given so many kinds of strange and unknown poisons. That damned stinking coward. Meiji smashed a fist into the wall, leaving a deep hole in it. Bai Ji Yan gulped, shocked by the sudden ferocious action of Meiji. When will this violent woman learn to be a little more gentle? What a waste of such a great-looking woman on the outside. The stinking coward she was referring to was the boss of the Hunters Guild himself, Zhuge Xiong. That man was also highly skilled in the art of healing, but he was more adept in poison. He had not been favored in the Dark Legion before because he was a man eager to claim credit, selfish and mercenary, and had a venomous heart. If someone were to offend him, he would inflict the most torturous poison upon that person, till that person would plead for death only to be denied, and suffer all kinds of heinous torment before he would die. Even men from within the Dark Legion had not been spared from his insidious plots. Hence, no one was willing to have any dealings with him, as they didn't know when the day would come that they would find themselves to have fallen under his strange and eccentric poisons, not even knowing what had killed them. He could even be completely absolved of all responsibility with the ice and fire yang grub in Lu Junyao's body. There were definitely very deep-seated grievances between Zhuge Xiong and the people of the Dark Legion. But at present, Bai Ji Yan patted Meiji reassuringly on her shoulder and said, "Rest assured. Little monster has always been such a heaven-defying being. He will surely be fine this time." Meiji glared at him fiercely. "You quack healer. Don't make excuses for your lack in skill. Didn't the Lord also fall under that stinking coward's sneaky plot as well? And what is the result?" Bai Ji Yan was a little embarrassed and he went on to cough a few times awkwardly. "I am indeed. Rather lacking in skill. But the Lord has now fully recovered, you know. An. His voice trailed off. Bai Yen seemed to suddenly recall something and he pulled out a small exquisite-looking box from his sleeve. When he opened it, two beautiful and perfectly rounded pills, one green and the other red, sat within, sparkling with a clear and bright luster. Chapter 39. 2. A Valiant Woman. The red one is an antidote, and it can purge all regular poisons. Bai Yen picked up the red pill and sniffed it before he said, "But I don't know if this can be considered as a regular kind of poison." Thereafter, he stuffed the pill into the mouth of the person lying on the bed. The pill immediately melted in the mouth, making it easy for it to be absorbed. Meiji had not even had the chance to ask him what he had fed little monster when she saw the deathly pale pallor on the man's face suddenly turn a little rosy. Her eyes grew wide as she stared. Could this be the moment of terminal lucidity, a prelude to his impending death? Bai Yen. What have you fed little monster with? You scoundrel. Are you trying to kill him? Meiji grabbed Bai Yan's shirt collar in her hand and was going to fight him to the death, her eyes turned hellishly red. All in all, her mind was filled only with thoughts of the worst things that could have happened. Why are you making such a racket? A soft voice floated over lightly, immediately breaking up the two people who had been about to get into a fight. Bai Yan's face was utterly flabbergasted. It has taken effect so quickly. Zhuge Xiong's skill with poisons was something even he was helpless against, and it had only taken just one antidote pill from that young lady to dispel it. Can it be any more humiliating than this? On the other hand, Meiji's face was one of pure delight as she looked at the man on the bed. Wearing a suit of snowy white underclothes, his demeanor slovenly, a pair of crystal-clear eyes sparkling like flawless rubies, which were exceptionally beautiful and mesmerizing. Because of those two incredibly mesmerizing blood-red orbs, an added alluring charm was added to his already handsome-looking countenance. You little rascal. You nearly scared this old woman to death. Meiji said, sobbing with joy, pouncing forward to go hug him so tightly she seemed like she wanted to mesh him into her bones. The man's brows knitted up, seemingly feeling very uncomfortable from her strong hug. He started to struggle and then called out, "Crazy woman. Let go of me." Ugh. The pair of red ruby eyes suddenly widened up with shock, and also looked a little lost. That beautiful and enchanting face was so close to him, and there was something soft that was pressed against his rather dry lips. Meiji, you. In that instant that he opened his mouth, the woman's nimble little tongue had already invaded inside, brutally overwhelming him. The man was so overtaken with fright that he could not move, his eyes looking like those of a startled little deer, letting the woman continue to kiss him maniacally, where a tinge of pinkdom rose up upon that handsome-looking face. Bai Yan's face was utterly dumbstruck. Isn't he a third person standing right there? Is it really all that appropriate for them to be committing such atrocities right before his face? He glared fiercely at the two of them, and then stormed out of the room indignantly. Bully him just because he does not have a woman, will they? Utterly despicable. The entire Dark Region's main palace was a uniform cold, grave and overwhelming black, majestic and boundless, and exuding an absorbing oppressive aura. The two ferocious beast statues just outside the doors with their sharp fangs and extended claws almost seemed alive, holding strong guard for the Dark Legion that had stood tall and strong for 100 years. It was said to be beasts that had accompanied a revered god of the ancients throughout his life, and when that revered god fell, these two ferocious beasts had left together with their owner. But though their bodies had suffered demise and their souls dispersed, their powerful oppressive aura still remained in existence. This was also the reason when the people of the Dark Region were relentlessly pursued and persecuted by the other powers, no one dared to come into the Dark Region itself to touch its people inside at all. At that moment, seated upon the elevated main seat, was a man wearing an ornate and regal suit, a purple brocade robe. His long slender arm propped up his chin, his eyes seemingly closed in rest. "My lord, the Bright Moon Divine Temple sent someone here to deliver an invitation, saying that they would be holding a celebration to congratulate my lord's return to Cloud Heaven. Will my lord want to accept the invitation? A man came walking in from outside the palace and fell to one knee, his hand holding up a light purple invitation card high above his head. The man's long lashes flicked slightly, and his eyes then opened slightly, his highly mysterious and regal violet eyes causing people's heart to palpitate with just one look at them. Chapter 39. 3. A valiant woman among the people of the dark region, besides Little Monster who was born with his flaming red blood eyes, few were able to escape from being bewitched by meeting Lu Junyao's devilish violet eyes. And the black-robed man down below had unintentionally just taken a cursory glance when he immediately felt his blood within surging with an immense pressure. It frightened him so much that he quickly averted his gaze away. The man up on the high seat glanced briefly at the invitation. Unsolicited goodwill. Reject it. Yes, my lord. The black-robed man answered respectfully, and then turned around to go out, to bump face to face right into Bai Zhiyan, who was just coming in through the door. The moment Bai Zhiyan saw the invitation card, he immediately knew who it was from. Looking at the immensely bored-looking man up there, he arched up an eyebrow and asked teasingly, "What? You are actually refusing an invitation from such a great beauty? It might not be all that nice, you know. Why not then you go on my behalf?" Lu Junyao said as his lips curled up, the expression on his face turning dangerous. "No, no, no. You must be joking. I do not have the fortune to receive such kindness. They do not deem me worthy at all." Bai Zhiyan quickly raised up his hands in front of him to say, and then threw a contemptuous glance at the man. Bai Zhiyan had already gotten used to being looked down upon, and he was not too bothered about it. He walked over to sit down on a chair at the side, and pulled out the tiny exquisite box from inside his sleeve. He then tossed it over to Lu Junyao as he said, "Something good. Keep it with you." After Lu Junyao was holding it in his hand, he then saw what it was. That was what Qinyu had left behind for them just before she left. His skills with poisons that scoundrel Zhuge Xiong has always been so proud of, were of no use before just one small antidote pill. It had immediately taken effect when Little Monster was fed it. Bai Zhiyan's tone of voice seemed to sound a little rueful, and his long narrow peach blossom-like eyes then shone brightly. "Junyao, that little lass is truly a treasure. Do you want to poach her over to join the Dark Legion?" Lu Junyao's violet eyes narrowed, his voice becoming low and deep. "I need you to tell me that. So you already have that intention. You're as astute and far-sighted as I expected," Bai Zhiyan said as he clicked his tongue. "How could I have forgotten how this man here had duped me so treacherously into coming over in the beginning?" Luo Junyao had come to completely know Bai Zhiyan through and through. Seeing how he was reacting, he immediately knew that the man was going to prattle on endlessly, and he quickly opened his mouth to interrupt without batting an eyelid. "Have you gone back to the Divine Healers sect to take a look yet?" Bai Zhiyan's eyes flared wide. "Are you kidding? Wouldn't I get my legs broken by those old ancestors of mine if I go back there? I angered them quite a bit back when I followed you out of there, and you're making such cynical remarks here now." Luo Junyao knew that he was not being fair to him and his coughed lightly behind his hand. "You are still the Divine Healers sect's young chief, and that bunch of old fogies will be bare to beat you up for sure. You can be assured of that." Hearing that, Bai Zhiyan became more angry. Just as he was about to throw a fit, Luo Junyao had already stood up above. "I'll accompany you back, and I can also have them take a look and ascertain my body's condition as well." Although Lu Junyao was the head chief of an unorthodox sect, but his mother had very deep ties with the Divine Healers sect. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Hence, before he founded the Dark Region, he was on extremely close terms with the Divine Healers sect. The Bai family's old ancestors had liked him very much, and when he had been inflicted with the voodoo poison, the old ancestors of the Bai family had expended great efforts on him. But when he later became the Lord of the Dark Region, even the divine healers sect who had always saved people from death and cared for the world were not able to accept that, and had broken off their ties with him. But in the end, he managed to dupe the divine healers sect's young chief out of the place, which made all their people secretly curse and swear at him hundreds and thousands of times. Upon hearing that he wanted to go to the divine healers sect, Bai Ji Yen was stunned. Ever since he came to reign over the dark region, the old man had not allowed for them to meet. Luo Junyao had not set foot into the territories of the divine healers sect for almost 100 years, and he must have decided to go there this time to allow him to return to his home soil. Chapter 40. 1. Killing each other, you. Don't overthink it. I am just going to seek an understanding about it from Old Man Bai, to see what the ice and fire yin-yang grub and the emotion-devouring curse is really all about. Lu Junyao's eyes narrowed, his violet eyes showing its familiar terrifying tempest. In hindsight, where vision was perfect, Bai Ji Yen then realized. How could he have forgotten that this fella was one who avenged the slightest grievance inflicted upon him? If the culprit behind it was discovered by him, he wouldn't even dare imagine the kind of fate that person would come to meet. Meanwhile, in the bright moon divine temple in the south, within an enormous and luxurious manor, a woman completely wrapped up in an all-black robe laid upon a bed, her exposed lower jaw deathly white and pale, which looked rather insidious. The wide loose sleeves fluttered noisily under the wind blowing in from outside the window. One of those sleeves was empty inside, while her other hand hung limply down at her side. After a rather long while, a series of strange chuckling sounds then came out from within that black robe. Ha 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 ha. I, as a priestess of the divine temple, has become a useless chess piece just like this. Temple Lord, you really have such a cruel heart. Her head that had been hanging down low suddenly lifted up, black and purple lines under the skin filled her face, making her look like an evil spirit from hell come to seek someone's life. Her eyes were bulging out a little, and below that was a pair of lips garishly red like blood, the corners of the mouth split wide, a highly terrifying sight. If I am to die, I will drag someone to cushion my fall. Ha 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 ha. That useless piece of trash from the low-level lands that dared to spoil my perfect plan. I will definitely grind your bones and scatter the dust to dispel the hatred in my heart. Mo Han Yan's days recently had been absolutely nauseating for her. She had originally decided to come out of seclusion because of a change in Yen Su's attitude towards those two illegitimate bastards in the tranquil abode, which caused her heart great unease. But it might not have been so bad if she had not come out, as coming out here had driven her so mad she wished she could throttle that little slut to death. Yen Su had not only often gone there to inquire about their welfare, he had even shown great favor to that lass. It was said that not only had she become smarter, she had even gotten herself a hidden expert as a master. There was a time that Yen Su brought her along to attend a good friend's gathering, and who would have thought that he would encounter an ambush by a gang of people. With Yen Su's well-known fame out there, though he was greatly respected, there would naturally also be people who hate him, with a good number of enemies as well. But he was highly skilled in martial arts himself, and he was naturally no fearful of such strife, open challenges or sneaky ambushes alike. But unexpectedly, the enemies had someone highly skilled in poison who caused all four of Yen Su's limbs to go numb, unable to move as he fell limp inside his horse carriage. Many of his guards outside were killed and wounded, and he was right about to see his own life fall into the enemy's insidious hands. But he had failed to notice that the expression of the young lady beside him had not shown the slightest ripple of alarm. The horse carriage was broken apart, and the sight of the pale-faced and completely weakened Yen Su seated right next to the white-robed young lady with an indifferent expression on her face formed an extreme stark contrast against each other. The enemies had clearly not expected that there would be a second person inside, and looking at her, she looked to be completely fine, seemingly not affected by the poison at all. The gang of enemies were all visibly stunned. Just as wariness started to rise in the hearts of those people, one person among them suddenly scrambled to pull out his own sword like he had gone mad to slash his sword at his companion beside him, cleaving that person in half right down the middle like he was splitting wood. The brutal and gory sight immediately caused the color several faces to change. But only realizing it at that moment and trying to defend themselves was already too late for them. The person suddenly turned attacker originally did not possess a high level of cultivation, and it seemed like he had suddenly turned into a peerless expert who had suddenly risen through the levels. The group of people were completely defenseless, completely massacred, and they were all killed in various brutal and horrifying ways. Even a great general like Yen Su, who had slaughtered enemies in the tens of thousands upon the battlefield, suddenly felt his stomach churn, nauseated by the sight. That person killed all his companions, and then raised his blade to slit himself across the throat. Chapter 40. 2. Killing each other. Yen Su was still in a state of shock and was not able to react until the gentle voice of the young lady beside him rose up. "Father, are you able to move already?" That was when he then came to discover that he was able to move his body, and the numbness that took away all his strength had disappeared without a trace. The corners of the young lady's lips before his eyes were slightly lifted, her face peerlessly beautiful. The sight before them was clearly one that would send a chill through the hearts of the most stalwart of men, where mutilated corpses lay strewn over the wilderness, but the young girl's face was looking just like normal, clearly not affected at all, as if she was not seeing any of this. "Qin, you aren't you frightened?" Yen Yu looked at her, the expression on his face looking rather complicated. "Frightened? Why? Just now. You were nearly killed by this group of people. But the fact is, I killed them all in the end, isn't it?" Qin Yu curled up the ends of her mouth, smiling warmly. That was when Yen Su then came to believe what she had said before. She had a very powerful master who guided her in her cultivation, and imparted to her knowledge in medicine, giving her the ability to protect herself and her younger brother. Yen Su might have believed that she really had a powerful master, but as for things said about how strong she had become, he had not believed a word of it. Besides little Ning, who was gifted and highly intelligent, there were not many women in the Green Wave Kingdom who could be considered to be strong, in fact few and far between. And even little Nian was now already 16 years old. But for this young little girl here, not even yet 14. If this was really true, that would be really too terrifying. Yen Su stared at the person before him, and immediately grew flustered in the next instant. Looked so much alike, to that person, her face completely alike. Even that personality, so much like hers. "Today, I saved Father, so Father might come to believe my words now. I wonder if I can make a request." "Tell it to me." "I hope from here henceforth, in the eternal peace Duke's manor, nobody would be able to interfere with my life and that of little Bays, including the Duchess." Qin Yu's devilishly mesmerizing phoenix-like eyes narrowed slightly. "Father is often not in the manor, and you would most probably not know my personality well. Although I have a rather good temper, but I detest having to deal with troublesome things. If anyone was to come find trouble with us, I will get very perplexed. When I get perplexed, I will naturally be in a bad mood. And when I'm in a bad mood, I will have to do something to vent out my frustration." How could Yen Su possibly not detect the true meaning behind her words? After the initial shock passed, he unexpectedly came to feel that this young girl had an adorably candid personality, and his demeanor then unconsciously grew a little doting and indulgent as he said with a slight smile, "As you wish." Towards Yen Ning Luo, he had especially favored and doted on her. She had shown great gifts from a very young age, and the Faint Mist sect leader absolutely adored her. Yen Ning Luo was mature and sensible, never causing him much worry. But as she stayed in the Faint Mist sect most of the time, the father and daughter relationship between the two of them were not that deep. And right before his eyes, another young little daughter of his whose looks were something people would not be able to take their eyes off had suddenly appeared. She was intelligent and obedient, but she was also full of bright ideas of her own and rather crafty, so easily likable. Yen Su's cold hard heart then suddenly seemed to have been heavily struck, feeling like he wanted to treasure and care for her. To make up for the 10 years lost before. Qin Yu was astute enough and she had sensed the change that had come over Yen Su, although she knew that he was actually seeing another person through her, who most probably should be that short-lived mother of this body she was occupying. But, since he was thinking to make up for not having been a good father to her, she was not entirely not amenable to reason, as she was also able to isolate themselves from that detestable duchess as well, killing two birds with one stone. Yen Su was in no mood to attend the gathering anymore, and he just rehired another horse carriage to drive them back to the manor. Chapter 40. 3. Killing each other, but upon returning back to the manor this time, something that everyone else would not be able to accept was bound to happen. As it was feared that the Duke's manor was about to undergo changes in its rule. When Yen Su came down from the horse carriage, he had then lovingly helped Qin Yu down right after, and then made an announcement that whoever was to see the sixth young miss, they were all to being highly respectful to her, never to slight her in any way. No one was to step into the tranquil abode as they wished henceforth, and Qin Yu would be allowed to go in and out of the Duke's manor freely. That special treatment caused all the other women to feel all kinds of envy and jealousy, with all of them cursing at the young lass, thinking she was really not that simple a girl after all to be able to win His Highness high favor and love, exactly the same kind of bewitching vixen like her mother was. Of course, no one had been as furious as Imo Han Yen was. She had immediately gone straight to Yen Su's study, and looking at the man dealing with his official duties, she had taken a deep breath to push down the rage in her heart to say, "Your Highness." Yen Su did not even raise his head as he grunted in acknowledgement. "Why would you want to do this? Have you forgotten the promise you made to me back then?" Han Imo Yen had her fists tightly clenched up under her sleeves. "You clearly told me that you will not soften your heart towards that woman who betrayed you, and will never care whether her children lived or died." Yen Su's hand paused in its writing, his head finally raising up to look at her. As a man close to 40, though his face showed slight signs of weathering, that mature man's handsome charm had become more enchanting, and Imo Han Yen could not help but become a little smitten as she stared. "I had indeed said those words." Yen Su stood up, looking down at the woman before him from his high vantage point, his gaze a little cold. "Is that why you went on to bribe the midwife when she was about to deliver, purposely tormenting her to suffer complications giving birth? Is that why when I was out on a military mission, you had the legs of a child who was just a few years old broken, causing him to become a cripple and condemned to be wheelchair-bound for life?" Imo Han Yan's eyes grew wide as saucers, staring at the man's cold and icy expression in utter disbelief. How? How did he come to find that out? It's not possible. There was clearly no one who knew about that matter, as the midwife who handled the delivery had been eradicated. Except for that child. But he was fed with drugs that had turned him into an idiot and would not be able to speak of it at all. Then, who could it be? For something not to be made known, it is unless the deed has not been committed. Yen Su snorted derisively. That gentle and kind Imo Han Yen who was once so loving and enchanting from before. Where has she gone to? Your talents and great intelligence had all been used to devise such dirty tricks and insidious plotting. I think that I have not treated you shabbily. Back when I married you, it had naturally been because I loved you. You were generous and smart, understanding and kind. I admit it, my heart had indeed been moved by Qing Fei, but did you know this? She did not love me. Even when I made my heart's intentions clear to her, she still rejected me. Yen Su's countenance turned rather dark. I settled her in the manor only to protect her, as I owed her a debt of gratitude for having saved my life. But you have caused me to bear the crime of being a dishonorable person and brought disgrace to my name. This was the first time Yen Su had said such words to Imo Han Yen, which caused her to collapse to the ground. Her countenance turned deathly pale, unable to recover her senses for a long time. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. So, for so many years, everything she had done had been wrong all this time. She had hated that woman. She had thought that the woman who had snatched her husband from her had not even loved Yen Su at all. Anne. She had sent that woman to her death with her own hands. Mo Han Yen stared into the icy gaze that Yen Su was looking at her, which pierced right into her bones, and her heart came to understand that they would never be able to go back to the way they were before. And all of that was witnessed by a pair of sparkling large eyes outside the door. The eyes turned away and then disappeared. Chapter 41. 1. Water Edge Kingdom visits. The tranquil abode now looked almost completely different. Besides the large swathes of herb beds in the yard having been tended to become more dazzlingly beautiful, the originally intricate weave of dried branches and vines had been completely cleaned up, giving the entire place a brand new look. In the little courtyard that had been exquisitely and tastefully cleaned up, a soft lounge had been placed. A young lady in a white dress laid upon it, lazily basking in the sun with one hand resting over her forehead, in unbelievable contentment. A white blur fleeted in at incredible speed from a certain direction in a flash, the blurry shadow so fast it was hard for the naked eye to even see, but was caught between two fingers by the young lady. Look at what this is. It was a beautiful snow toad, its entire body snowy white, a little creature the size of a baby's palm. Its two large sparkling eyes were highly intelligent, its four limbs kicking and struggling incessantly in the air, looking pleadingly at the smiling person in front of its face. Qin Yu propped herself up from the soft lounge and squeezed the little creature in her hand a little. Where have you gone to get wild these past few days? To think you still knew well enough to come back. I had thought that you had gone out to look for food. Why have you not eaten and come back here skinnier? The snow toad blinked its eyes innocently. I have always been so slim, you know. It was just thinking to protest when it suddenly recalled something important, and it immediately couldn't care any less that it was currently in such a humiliating position, squeezed in the hand of that person. It then waved its short little limbs while opening and closing its mouth like it was trying to say something. To the eyes of any other person, the little creature would merely look like it was up to its tricks by trying to look adorably helpless. But Qin Yu was able to understand what it was saying. The pair of alluring upslanted phoenix-like eyes then perked up with interest. Things were becoming more and more interesting. All right. Seeing that you brought back useful information, I'll let you off. Qin Yu curled up her lips, breaking into a highly gentle smile. She released her grip and the snow toad then fell onto its behind on the ground, caught completely off guard. It was just about to throw a fit when it heard that melodious voice drift over sinisterly. I heard that a snow toad's body contains all kinds of great precious effects. I wonder what they taste like double-boiled. The little creature on the ground shivered, and then quickly turned over to pretend to play dead, not moving an inch. But in its heart, it was shedding tears. How harsh it is. Life is just so harsh. Ever since that big incident happened at the New Moon Lake that day, as the crown prince, Xianyuan Che had immediately gone back to the palace to report the matter, and he was almost certain that the Duke of Vast Seas and the 9th Princess Wuxia Yen were already in the Green Wave Kingdom. But why had they delayed coming to the palace? That was a point that many people felt was rather unfathomable. The people were all guessing in their hearts, whether they were carrying out some secret investigation, and after getting a clear picture, they would then declare war upon the Green Wave Kingdom. The Green Wave Emperor was seen to deeply troubled, his face melancholy and depressed. The words Duke of Vast Seas were like a cancer, that made him feel hatred and terror, but could not afford to show him wary respect. Despite the fact that the people over on this side had thought up 1,000,001 possibilities to be the reason that the Duke of Vast Seas had brought forward his arrival unannounced without showing himself, the man in question himself had actually come 2 days earlier merely to handle some personal affairs. And on this trip here, he had only brought along 2 people with him, Wuxia Yen and Ajin. As the other people from the Water Edge Kingdom had not even reached, so he had not yet gone to the Imperial Palace to seek an audience with the Emperor. After all, with one as the Duke and the other a princess of their kingdom, they could not possibly show up without an official delegation. The rest of the Water Edge's delegation would reach the Green Wave's Imperial capital in about another 1 day and a half, and that would be the best time for them to present themselves to the Emperor in the palace. But for Qin Yili, who had stayed in the Afterlife loft for the past 3 days, he had not received anything fruitful from it. Chapter 41. 2. Water Edge Kingdom Visits. You couldn't find anything. The countenance beneath the mask darkened imperceptibly. Every little frown and every faint smile from the person in the painting was so moving, but unfortunately, it was after all still just a painting, where one was able to see, but not able to touch. Qin Yili sighed softly. "Where are you, Highness?" Ah Jin's voice came in from outside the door. "Just received news that the Water Edge's delegation led by General Wei will be reaching the Imperial capital in another hour." "All right." Qin Yili kept his thoughts away, and his tall and slender figure stood up from the chair, turning back into the high and mighty, stern-faced Duke of Vast Seas, one not prone to smiling or words. The people of the Water Edge Kingdom had come, and the atmosphere in the capital city was a little frenzied. For no other reason than the fact that the one person who had come was the god of slaughter, the Duke of Vast Seas, whose fame drove everyone throughout the lands to tremble in their boots. That was a person whom even the Emperor himself had to be wary of. It was rumored that the Duke of Vast Seas looked vicious and ferocious, and that was why he always wore a mask before people. Otherwise, people who saw his real countenance would have their very lives completely frightened out of them. Adults had often used that to scare disobedient children, telling them if they continued to be naughty, they would send them to the Duke of Vast Seas, whereby the children would then not dare to be mischievous and be up to any more tricks. Hence it could very well be imagined, how big an effect this visit had on the people, when even young children have heard of his infamy. The Green Wave Emperor had specially arranged for the Crown Prince and the Duke of Eternal Peace to go forth and receive the people from the Water Edge Kingdom, in a show of respect. The entire Water Edge Kingdom's grand delegation consisted of a good 100 people, all dressed in the same deep blue military uniform, with one lone man on a horse leading in front, his face stalwart and rugged, his figure toweringly burly while exuding a austere aura. The man was one of the Water Edge Kingdom's generals who was skilled in warfare and battle, a born warrior, and a highly trusted aide of the Duke of Vast Seas. Behind him were 2 beautiful and luxurious palanquins, each carried by 8 people treading with firm and steady steps. The one in front was light blue in color, which looked highly intricate and pretty. That must be that Water Edge Kingdom's 9th princess inside, where rumors about her claimed that she was almost as divine as a goddess. The palanquin before was silver, and it looked a lot more simple, but looked grand and unpretentious. The indistinct figure of a person could be seen faintly inside, and with the occasional breeze that blew past, the silver hair of that person stood out strikingly. People in the world all knew that the Water Edge Kingdom's Duke of Vast Seas was born with a head of extraordinary silver hair, and a pair of eyes that was a deep green like those of a wolf. Even though they were unable to get a clear look, that silver hair had already proven his identity. That evil demon. I get so angry my entire body hurts the moment I see him. Yu Xiaoning clenched her teeth together, her large limpid eyes brewing with rage. But after saying that, she then noticed that she was not getting any response. She turned her head around in puzzlement, to find Yan Ning Luo, who was always as expressionless as a mountain of ice, staring with her cold indifferent eyes, focused unwaveringly in a particular direction, or rather, a particular person. And the gaze of those eyes were actually showing a tinge of liking. Yu Xiaoning just could not believe her own eyes. This woman who had only ever shown interest in cultivation was actually capable of showing such an expression as if she had just seen her sweetheart. Yu Xiaoning took a deep breath and then asked cautiously, "Little Ning, I am talking to you here. Who are you looking at?" Yan Ning Luo seemed to have only just heard Yu Xiaoning saying something, and she then turned her gaze back, her sparkling eyes looking a little joyful. She looked at Yu Xiaoning and then slowly revealed a smile. "I have finally seen him again, and I will never be left clueless on how to find him again." "What did you say?" Yu Xiaoning was a little shocked as her eyes flared wide, her heart seemingly having realized something but just did not dare to believe it. Chapter 41 3. Water Edge Kingdom visits. The smile at the corners of Yan Ning Luo's lips then deepened a little. You remember that I told you before that there was a person I liked? Yu Xiaoning blinked her eyes, struggling to recall. Digging down deep into her memories, she then finally found a faint impression. I seem to have come to like someone. Yan Ning Luo had only been 7 or 8 years old then. Her young Imperial voice had said to the similarly young and tiny Yu Xiaoning then that she had found someone she liked. And that liking had blossomed, slowly growing deeper, to become love. To think that such a small little girl had already known how to like a person, and that liking had gone on for 8 whole years. Yu Xiaoning was a little startled. Little Ning, you've got to be kidding. Tell me, who is this person that you have come to like? Yan Ning Luo's gaze grew gentle. He told me his name is Qin Yili. A long time ago, I only knew his name, but I was not aware that he is actually the Duke of Vast Seas. The name of the Duke of Vast Seas was indeed Qin Yili, but no more than a handful of people dared to call him by his name, and as time passed, the people had almost forgotten what his name was, but only knew him to be the Duke of Vast Seas. That god of slaughter had even told her his name. Could he possibly be interested in little Ning as well? Yu Xiaoning was in shock as her thoughts raced. That man was just too terrifying. And little Ning is actually in love with him. Although he is very powerful indeed, and you wouldn't be able to find more than a few who would be able to stand up against him. But wouldn't little Ning then have to suffer under that unpredictable temperament and the eccentric mood swings of that man? Just thinking about it, and Yu Xiaoning could not help but worry for her good friend. But the most crucial point was, little Ning, have you forgotten that you have a marriage engagement with the Crown Prince? By doing this, aren't you making him a cuckold now? But she did not dare speak those last few words aloud. He doesn't like me anyway, so does it even matter? Yan Ning Luo smiled indifferently. Wait till he has someone he likes, we will then go to His Majesty to annul the marriage engagement. Yu Xiaoning knitted up her brows. His Majesty will definitely not agree to it. Little Ning, don't forget. The Duke of Vast Seas is an enemy of the Green Wave Kingdom. So what? At most, I will just give up being a princess and go to the water edge with him. Yan Ning Luo had said those words very lightly, but it had clunked heavily in Yu Xiaoning's heart. It seems like she was really very much in love with that Duke of Vast Seas fella. But with just one look, it was clear that that man was not easy to get along with. Can't help but wonder what kind of bewitching brew that man had given Yan Ning Luo. No matter what she said at that moment, Yan Ning Luo would not listen. Yu Xiaoning then just clamped her mouth shut. Soon, the Water Edge Kingdom's delegation were assigned their lodgings. It was a unique structure, grand and magnificent, a non-permanent palace situated on the west side of the Imperial Palace. It was said the place was constructed only 1 year ago, used specifically only to receive delegations from other kingdoms, and the Water Edge Kingdom's emissaries were the first people to stay in that annex. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. As they had come a far and long distance and were all travel-worn, the Green Wave Kingdom then allowed the delegation some time to rest and organize themselves, by setting the welcome banquet to start later after nightfall. The Water Edge Kingdom had said that they were sending the 9th princess here for matchmaking, but it was in fact just provocation. It must be known that in the Green Wave Kingdom's imperial family, besides the Crown Prince Shenyuan Che and the denounced 6th Prince Shenyuan Qi, they did not have any other princes they could bring out that was considered worthy of this 9th princess. Unfortunately, among those two, one already had a crown prince consort already decided upon, and they couldn't possibly ask a highborn princess of another kingdom to be a concubine, could they? As for the other 6th prince, although denounced, he was still a direct disciple in the inner circle of the Limitless Sect's sect leader, which was one of the 3 great sects, and his maternal clan was the Constellation Land's top family clan of medical cultivators, his identity rather extraordinary. But the most crucial point was that his relationship with the current reigning emperor was on rather bad terms and it was impossible for them to reconcile. Chapter 42. 1. I'm very timid. The reasons behind that was known only to insiders in the palace and it was not known by others. All in all, the Water Edge Kingdom's visit this time was definitely not friendly. Although the Duke of Vast Seas was infamous for his notoriety, but there were still quite a number of hot-blooded youths that worshipped him, with Qin Bei no exception from it. Besides Big Brother Yan Shicheng, the person he admired the most was the Duke of Vast Seas. Hence, after he came to know that the delegation had come to the capital, he had specially sneaked a trip outside to go have a look. Although he did not manage to see him in person, he was already very satisfied. He was just intending to sneak back into his room when he heard a voice filled with mirth. Gone out so early in the morning? Where did you go? Qin Bei's face froze up, and he then slowly turned around. Sis, morning. Qin Yu arched up an eyebrow as she looked at the sun that had risen high up in the sky. The sun has risen up almost to the top and you say it's still morning? Stop trying to pull wool over my eyes. What did you go out for? I just wanted to see the Duke of Vast Seas. Qin Bei knew the game was up for him, and he just told her the truth. It was only then that Qin Yu remembered it, and she then asked with a smile, You managed to see him? The young lad shook his head forlornly. No. He was seated inside a palanquin. Qin Yu smiled and ruffled the young lad's head. Don't give up, you'll meet him someday. Sis, I heard that father favors you very much recently. Asking that so suddenly out of the blue, Qin Yu was taken aback. She then raised up an eyebrow. What? You're jealous? Why would I? Qin Bei could not help but smile and shake his head. I only meant to say since father favors you so highly now, he will definitely bring you with him to attend the banquet in the palace this time. I can't even be bothered to go to such places. Qin Yu curled her lips up in a disdainful sneer. The banquet at the palace is merely an attempt to establish good ties between the two kingdoms, and only to cement their position further. Isn't it said that they had even sent a princess here for matchmaking? When the Water Edge Kingdom has such a powerful Duke of Vast Seas, will they still need to consolidate their territories through matchmaking? I do not think so. Hence, they are here purely only to pick a quarrel, and such banquets are the most boring of all. Qin Bei stared speechlessly at the calm demeanor of his own sister, his heart filling up with utmost admiration and respect for her. This sister of his was anything but ordinary indeed. Those words were not something any normal girl would be able to utter, and she had actually shown absolutely no interest in a man like the Duke of Vast Seas who had so many countless ladies hopelessly smitten and head over heels in love. Really wonder what kind of a man would then be able to catch her eye. Qin Bei suddenly started to worry about his currently still non-existent future brother-in-law who would still be hiding in some unknown nook or cranny. And at that same moment, situated in the north of Cloud Heaven, within a mysterious and surreptitious high black tower, a man suddenly sneezed for no reason at all. The pair of violet eyes then showed a rare moment of bewilderment. It was midsummer, the weather was clear and fine, without a cloud for 1,000 miles and the air was even slightly scorching. He couldn't possibly have caught a cold. What kind of a joke was this? Having lived for several hundred years and he had not even suffered much in the way of an injury, not mention falling ill. That would then mean someone was thinking of him. The handsome thin lips lifted up slightly at the ends, and it was not known what was on his mind, as the man's mood then became exceptionally bright and radiant in tandem with the depth of the arc on his mouth. Why? Have I suddenly come to miss that little fox? Not only those eyes were enticing like a fox's but everything about her was alluring. Although he had not really seen it that time, but the great body under those loose clothes was something he had truly felt, which was so damningly soft. That a dark lord who had always done as he pleased with wild abandon in cloud heaven for several hundred years would one day come to miss a little lass from a low-leveled land was absolutely shocking to hear. Chapter 42. 2. I'm very timid. It really turned out exactly as Qing Bei had said, and Yen Su came to the tranquil abode personally himself. The young lady in all white was half crouched within the large swathes of magnificent-looking herb beds, her eyes exquisite, looking like a painting. Her slender fingers picked off a pale pink flower and brought it under her nose to take a whiff. It must not really smell good, as that tiny face then creased up in disdain, looking incredibly adorable. The gently elegant green-robed youth sat upon a wheelchair at the side, reading a book as he occasionally lifted his head up to glance at her. The similar-looking countenances of those two were both incomparably exquisite and eye-catching, and in this not too large little courtyard, it made for a blissful and warm sight, beautiful as a painting. Yen Su's heart suddenly softened exceptionally, and he couldn't bear to disturb the peaceful scene, where he just stood there quietly to gaze at them. How? Are you able to digest everything you're reading? Qing Yu saw the lad's serious expression, and she walked over to him from the herb beds. Medical books are very dry. I learned medicine because I had no other choice. Why do you want to pick it up? Qing Bei raised his head up from the book and gave her a faint smile. I am thinking, if I am able to learn a little of it to protect myself, at least I do not have to worry about being ambushed with poison. Is that why? Qing Yu nodded, and she patted him on the shoulder smilingly. That is great. Although it's dry and dull, but you cannot deny that there are many advantages about it. Look at how sought after those medical cultivators are. They have endless treasures, no lack of beauties, and unlimited fame and fortune. The side of Qing Bei's temple twitched. I am not interested in all that. That will not do. A person has got to have pursuits in his life. I heard that the Water Edge Kingdom's 9th princess is here, and she is about the same age as you. It is said her looks and talents are absolutely top-notch, so why don't I go help you see? Sis, I really am not interested, all right. She is a regal and revered princess. How could she possibly be interested in me who has no power, no authority, an unfavored cripple? Don't go stir up trouble. Qing Bei interjected, to stop his sister's nonsensical prattle. Qing Yu snorted derisively. Is there another person who would debase themselves so completely? Who dares to say my little brother is not good? No, I was just. Father? Qing Bei suddenly noticed the man standing not too far away from them, his face highly benevolent, and Qing Bei was a little startled. Qing Yu raised up an eyebrow and turned herself around, where she then saw Yen Su walking towards them with a smile. She curled up the ends of her lips and asked, Father, you're here. Is something the matter? Towards this father who had neglected them for more than 10 years, Qing Yu did not have much feelings towards him, despite the fact that he was trying very hard to make it up to them. Hence, towards Yen Su, she always showed him a gentle but distant demeanor. Yen Su did not mind what kind of attitude she showed him, even when she addressed him as father so coldly. Among so many of his daughters, only Qing Yu called him father, which just made it even more precious. This young lady was almost an exact duplicate of Qing Fei, and Yen Su was liking her better the more he looked at her. I just came back from the Imperial Palace and popped by to see the two of you along the way. Yen Su's voice was incredibly gentle and his gaze then turned to the lad in his wheelchair. Are you doing fine, little Bei? The last time when I got the palace's chief medical cultivator Yun Qi to come here to diagnose your condition, he said that there is still hope in restoring the use of your legs. I believe that you will be able to stand up again. Yen Su's heart was filled with guilt towards Qing Bei. The condition of his legs were caused by the actions of Mo Han Yen, but he was unable to punish the Duchess. Having been married as husband and wife for more than 20 years, if he did that, it would definitely chill Mo Han Yen's heart into stone. Qing Yu had not known about such an incident at all. She had not known that the palace's medical cultivator had come here before. She glanced at the lad who had a faint smile on his lips. This kid isn't as simple as he looks. He was actually able to fool a medical cultivator's eyes. Looks like he might indeed possess some gift in medicine after all. Chapter 42. 3. I'm very timid. Yen Su then continued to say, the Imperial Palace is holding a banquet tonight to entertain the Water Edge Kingdom's emissaries, and a round of open challenges and hidden intrigue will be unavoidable. I'll bring the two of you into the palace with me, and I'll get your big brother to come get you when it's time. Qin Yu raised his head up and blinked his eyes innocently. Why is father doing this? You know that the other party harbors unfriendly intentions and you still want to bring us into the palace with you? My younger brother is not exactly able-bodied and I am very timid. We might end up causing father shame and then suffer reprimand for it. I think it's better we do not go. Yen Su was at a loss for words. Because the children of their commoner mothers from the families of the other high-ranking officials were not qualified to enter the palace due to their lowly birth, every single one of them were doing everything within their powers to win the favor of their father, only thinking of being able to show their faces in the palace, to see if they would be able to find someone their hearts fancied. More importantly, they would be able to meet the one and only Duke of Vast Seas, whom countless men and women worshipped and revered. But what was going on here with his own daughter? Does she really not want to go, or was she just fishing for something? Timid is she? Back when she killed those black-robed assassins that ambushed them, she had been rather gutsy though. How could Yen Su not know that she was pulling a fast one? And he snapped at her with a glare. I do not want to hear any more. Little Cheng will come pick the two of you up later. Change into a set of clothes suited for a banquet. Wearing such plain clothes will make others think that the Eternal Peace Duke's manor is in dire straits, even having to scrimp and save on basic necessities like clothing. Upon finishing his words, he did not wait for Qin Yu to respond but just turned to leave with a flick of his sleeves. Qin Yu could not say anything. What had she said wrong? Why doesn't he even give her a chance to refuse? A spurt of mirthful laughter burst out beside her. Here she was feeling depressed and indignant, and the lad was there sniggering. That was just absolutely intolerable. She then rapped an explosive knuckle upon the young lad's head. It's that funny? Qin Bei was unable to dodge that knuckle in time, and his jaws clenched tightly from the pain. He gingerly rubbed the top of his head, with a smile still hanging upon his face. Sis, your acting just now was just too fake. Too fake. That's right. When you said that I am not able-bodied and unable to walk, it was still believable. But when you said you were timid, how timid could you possibly be when you dare to kill people so readily? A corner of Qin Yu's mouth twitched. So, that was the reason. She was thinking, what was that admonishing gaze her father gave just before he left all about? Forget it. Since she was unable to avoid it, then let it pass. It's just a change in location in where she'll be having her meal anyway. After all, she still had her father and elder brother to fall back on even if the sky were to fall. But at that moment, Qin Yu still did not know that danger was silently sneaking up and slowly closing on her. Bright Moon Divine Temple, you said Grand Priestess Yin Qi has disappeared? The graceful and enchanting voice of a woman sounded from behind the curtain. Reporting to the Temple Lord. Ever since the day you locked Grand Priestess Yin Qi in the confinement chamber, she had not come out again. The maid who brought food daily said she has not eaten anything for quite a number of days, and I was still thinking whether she had died in there, never expecting that I would find nobody in there when I went into the confinement chamber today. A white-robed woman below said, her head hanging low respectfully. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. This young temple lord, was a woman whose cultivation was the most powerful, and she was also the most vicious throughout the past generations of Bright Moon Temple. No one dared to defy her, much less betray. The Bright Moon Temple was famous for their voodoo arts and ability to lay curses. Everyone was controlled by the grub in their bodies, and if anyone was to betray the one who laid the curse, their souls would suffer from lashings, till they die from the torment. And the voodoo craft of this temple lord could be said to have almost reached the realm of perfection. which drove terror into the hearts of people. Hearing the white-robed woman's words, the person high up in the primary seat merely laughed out loud instead. "In Chi, oh In Chi, even upon death you seek to drag someone to cushion your back." Chapter 43. 1. Imperial Banquet night fell, and the Green Wave Kingdom's imperial capital was littered with lanterns that lit up the entire city that bustled with activity. It was because in another few days, it would be the Green Wave Kingdom's All Saints' Day that was celebrated once every 3 years, where even the city's merchants were frantically gearing up in preparation for the celebration. The reason why the Green Wave Kingdom had such a festival stemmed back to a day 16 years ago, when the Eternal Peace Duke Manor's Princess Ning Feng was born. Just overnight, all the flowers in the city had bloomed, the birds rose in song. It was also in that year that the Emperor of the Green Wave Kingdom formally ascended to the throne. Having just assumed the highest seat in the lands, and auspicious signs manifested one after another, with glad tidings flowing in endlessly. Hence, the Emperor liked Yan Ning Luo very much, and he immediately decreed that she would be engaged to his eldest son in marriage after Yan Ning Luo was born. Xianyuan Che was just a child about 4 or 5 years old at that time, and he suddenly found himself bound down by a girl he had never even met before. Because of that, he did not have the slightest sliver of liking towards Yan Ning Luo, despite the fact that she was a prodigious woman who possessed both beauty and power. Affinity and fate were indeed things that worked in such mysterious ways. Example in case, with the arrival of the Water Edge Kingdom's delegation, the engaged couple Xianyuan Che and Yan Ning Luo would most naturally have to be pushed together, where even her entrance into the palace had needed Xianyuan Che to personally make a trip to the Eternal Peace Duke's manor to escort Yan Ning Luo inside. It was a rare occasion that Qin Bei got a chance to change into a more formal royal blue brocade robe, his black hair bound up with a jade headpiece. The youth's gentle air and graceful handsome countenance, when paired together with that whole outfit, undoubtedly gave out an elegant flair of high nobility, and if he were to walk out, he would surely have thousands and thousands of young ladies mesmerized by his handsome looks. But when he opened the door of his room and saw Qin Yu wearing a white dress that could not be any more plain and simple, he was highly taken aback for a moment before he said, "Sis, aren't you going to change?" The young lady over there was still lounging upon the lounge chair and bullying the poor little snow toad, her finger poking at its soft underbelly. "I had not wanted to attend a boring banquet like that in the first place, so why would I need to dress myself up for it? I am not going there to steal the limelight, you know." Qin Bei nodded, thinking that she was completely right. His sister was already so beautiful looking being herself, and if she were to dress herself up to the nines, it was thought that she would surely draw trouble upon herself. "Talking about you instead. Which young and innocent girl are you trying to hook dressing yourself up to look like that?" Qin Yu said with a teasing smile. "I am only discovering today that our family's little Bei is blessed with such great looks. You always keep such a low profile. Do you know, with this transformation today you'll be able to leave all the other young masters of royalty and nobles trailing in your dust several streets behind?" Qin Bei was at a loss for words. He didn't care for such insincere flattery. Palanquins and sedan chairs were not allowed inside the imperial palace, and everyone who came to attend the banquet had to alight at a place near the palace before making their way inside on foot. "Did the two of you bring me here just to relieve yourselves of boredom?" Finally unable to stand the uncomfortably quiet atmosphere any longer, Mu Qi opened his mouth to say morosely. Looking at Xianyuan Che and Yan Ning Luo, who sat across each other, where one had eyes staring unwaveringly outside the window, the other with eyes closed and rest, face completely expressionless. Mu Qi had not wanted to set foot inside the imperial palace at all, as the place contained too many memories he did not want to recall. But as he had been too curious about that man of legend, he had come. He swung his gaze over the two people in puzzlement. Has these two people privately come to a secret agreement to get along peacefully? But with them leaving him, a living person, hung out here to dry on his own. Is that really appropriate? Mu Qi let out a helpless sigh. If he had known that it would turn out like this, he would not have come with them. Your Highness. We're here at the Imperial Palace. The guard driving the carriage said outside the door. Xianyuan then opened his eyes, where a glint flashed very briefly, but faded away in a blink. But Mu Qi had seen it clearly. Completely besotted with cultivation as he had thought. He was even cultivating while his eyes were closed on the journey. From the way things looked now, it was thought that he was going to have to suffer big time in future. Chapter 43. 2. Imperial Banquet. Yan Ning Luo similarly turned her gaze back from outside and her eyes inadvertently met with Xianyuan Che black ones, but the latter was already getting off the horse carriage and then extending his hand out towards her, looking like he wanted to help her off. Yan Ning Luo was clearly a little startled, but she did not hesitate too long before she offered up her hand to let Xianyuan Che help her off the horse carriage. That should be the one and only time those two people had come into such intimate physical contact over so many years. It's His Highness the Crown Prince and Princess Ning Feng. They really look so compatible together. At that moment, the young masters and young misses from the various noble families were also arriving, and when they saw the couple getting off from the carriage hand in hand, they all then let out gasps of envy and approval. Xianyuan Che was wearing a suit of pale gold palatial dress, a highly lifelike for-clawed golden dragon embroidered upon it. He had a tall and well-built body, and the man with such high prospects was at the moment absolutely oozing with the strongly irrefutable noble and authoritative air as the crown prince of a kingdom. Hence, even though he already had his beau right by his side, he had nevertheless still attracted the admiration of countless chamber maidens there. Let's go. Xianyuan Che had not noticed any of those strange gazes at all, and he went on to mutter something indifferently to Yan Ning Luo before the two of them went in through the palace gates one after the other. Inside the palace annex, Wuxia Yen had already organized her things. She absolutely adored the color blue, and that was why the clothes she wore were always all blue. But the color also suited her very well, mischievous and quick-witted like a sprite. "Ah Jean, where is big brother Yi Li?" Wuxia Yen asked when she saw the lad standing outside by the door. Ah Jean smiled gently and replied, "His Highness is waiting for you." Wuxia Yen revealed a sweet smile upon hearing that, and the moment she stepped out, she saw a man standing there with his hands behind his back, his dark red brocade robe in contrast against the full head of silver hair, a sight filled with an indescribable kind of beauty. A great number of cherry blossom trees had been planted in the palace annex. It was a scenery that one would not be able to see in the Water Edge Kingdom, as such plants were not able to grow in places where there was extreme changes to its weather. A breeze blew in, stirring up the man's long silver hair in his broad sleeves, and blowing off a countless number of flower petals to scatter and fall from the branches, landing upon his hair and his clothes. He raised his head up slightly, and a single petal fell right upon that set of dark red lips. In that instant it was just so breathtakingly beautiful. Both Wuxia Yen and Ah Jean behind her were caught in a daze gazing at that sight. Ever since Qin Yi Li had appeared in the Water Edge Kingdom, he had been wearing that mask. No one had ever seen his real face, but with the elegant and noble air that emanated from him and that mysteriously profound cultivation he possessed, his countenance would surely be anything but ordinary. The rumors said that his looks were hideous, and that was why he did not dare reveal his face before people. But that was also because no one had really come to interact with him closely before. There were some kinds of people who were able to make you disregard and ignore all other external factors but just cause a person to be shaken to the core by his very being. And Qin Yi Li was unmistakably just that kind of a person. No one knew his heart, and hence, there was always a certain desolate bleakness about him, a cold indifference that seemed to isolate himself, pushing others 1,000 miles away. Everything anyone saw him like that, one just could not help but unconsciously feel their heart wince with pain for this powerful, but lonely man. Wuxia Yan's eyes grew inexplicably red-rimmed watching him and could not help but break that rather sad and depressing atmosphere by opening her mouth to call out, "Big brother Yi Li, you must not be sad. You will surely find that big sister." She was thinking, that big brother Yili must be feeling so sad and dispirited because he had been unable to find that lady in the portrait. Chapter 43. 3. Imperial Banquet. Qin Yili only lowered his head to look at the young lady whose height only reached up to his chest, and he curled up the corners of his lips as he reached his hand out to give her a gentle pat on her head. What are you thinking of? Wuxia Yen was feeling a little confused with that pat on her head. Isn't it because big brother Yili wasn't able to find that big sister that is making you feel unhappy? Qin Yili smiled slightly but did not explain any further. The several guards who were to escort the guests from the Water Edge Kingdom were already waiting outside the palace annex, and when they saw the guests come out, they all bowed in greeting. Your Highness, 9th Princess. Qin Yili acknowledged indifferently and then went forward on his own in front. In a suit of deep red, a head of silver hair aflutter, the wolf-shaped mask mysterious and sinister, his entire person exuded an incredibly carefree aura. Wuxia Yen took the initiative to go forward to stand beside him, with everyone else falling in line behind. The entire line of people immediately turned to look like accessories to the two in front. The palace annex to the Imperial Palace was merely only a distance of slightly more than 10 steps away. The banquet was about to begin, and it would be just right to go there now. Qin Yili had never liked to wait for people, and so he had chosen to be the person people waited for. The Imperial Palace's Grand Hall was already filled with people, the men and women folk seated at separate tables, their seating arrangements naturally based on the hierarchical order of seniority and rank. The emperor upon the dragon's seat looked very young, a certain sense of righteousness between his brows, already imposing without anger in them. Directly below him to his left were the seats of the Duke of Eternal Peace Yen Su and the Crown Prince Shenyuan Che, while on the right was the left Prime Minister Yu Qinghai and High General Mo Yuan Wei, who had served a few generations of emperors. Lined up right after, were several of the princes and princesses just around 10 years of age, and then some of the more prominent aristocrats and senior ministers. Right at the end, then came the family members of the nobles. The top prodigy, the most talented young lady Yan Ning Luo, was naturally seated at the leading seat, and seated beside her was the left Prime Minister's family's young Miss Yu Xiaoning. Surrounding them were some pampered young misses who came uninvited to fawn and curry favor. Yan Ning Luo's expression was cold and apathetic, her eyes scanning across the grand hall sweepingly. Is he not here yet? That must be it. With such a revered and honored identity, coming a little late is to be expected. She will definitely see him in time. Thinking about that, the highly tense string in her heart then slightly relaxed. On the other side, Qin Yili and his convoy of people had already come to the Imperial Palace. When they were passing a pavilion in the Imperial Garden, the sound of people talking suddenly reached them. By that time, all the guests should already have reached, and the palace maids and servants should have been summoned into the grand hall to serve the guests. There shouldn't be anyone here anymore. Qin Yili did not bother himself with it, and he raised his foot to continue his way forward. And it was only after they had walked a good distance away that two figures suddenly shot out from within the darkness. One of them was covered up entirely in a large loose hooded cape, and only that deathly pale white chin could be faintly seen, strange and terrifying. The man beside that figure similarly possessed a deathly pale complexion, his lifeless eyes looking like those of a marionette that was being controlled. His lips then opened and enunciated haltingly, "Someone seems to have noticed us just now. Heh heh. There are quite a number of crouching tigers and hidden dragons in this place." The person under the hooded cape sneered. "We don't need to bother about that person yet. Didn't you say that you sensed the presence of the person who wounded me? Continue to look for him." "Yes." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU, announcing the arrival of the Water Edge Kingdom's Duke of Vast Seas and the 9th Princess. A clear voice raised up outside the doors, reverberating within the vast palace hall, and the sounds of voices raised in revelry suddenly stopped in an instant. The Green Waves Emperor on the topmost seat also sat up, his eyes looking straight at the doors. Only a small number of people present had ever seen the Duke of Vast Seas, and most of them have only heard how legendary he was, almost like a god, but have never laid eyes upon the actual person before. The moment had finally come that they would be able to see this man whose rumors about him were almost legendary, and the people's hearts were all unbelievably excited and were almost quivering. Chapter 44. 1. Love snatched away in a suit of deep red, thick and smooth silver hair, a wolf-shaped mask that covered half his face, deep green eyes and smooth white skin, all of these made him look exceptionally different from others. Even though that was the case, that mysterious and aloof air around him still drew everyone's eyes where they could not help but stare, measuring him up, leading to the pretty and lively ninth princess, Wuxia Yen, beside him to be neglected for the first time. But Wuxia Yen did not mind. She had long gotten used to it. Whenever she was with big brother Yili, she was always the one being overlooked. Sis. Look. The Duke of Vast Seas. The lad's slightly excited voice awoken the almost half-asleep Qin. She rolled her eyes at him. She was so bored she was almost falling asleep, and this kid was not even letting her rest peacefully. He's just too much. Because their identities were lowly in there, they could only sit right at the back of the hall. There was basically not much people where they were, and it was quiet in that area. Hence, even if they were to discourteously fall asleep, no one would even notice, as all the big shots were all the way right in front. After being disturbed by Qin Bei, she not longer felt like sleeping anymore, and she raised her eyes up lazily to take a look. The man who had everyone's eyes on him was just sitting there quietly, his thin lips pressed slightly together, his gaze indifferent. His head of silver hair was luxuriant, the midsummer season seemingly hadn't warmed his person up in the slightest, as a chilling wintry aloofness seemed to emanate from him. Qin Yu's gaze suddenly froze in shock, and her eyes that were originally lazily half-open suddenly flared wide, looking a little stunned. Qin Bei saw the way she was staring, and he could not help but chuckle gleefully. How is it? Isn't he a very special person? The Duke of Vast Seas is very powerful, and I heard that he was actually able to go up into the higher-leveled lands, but because of a promise he made, he remained here. What a righteous man he is who stands by his word. Qin Bei really worshipped the Duke of Vast Seas from the bottom of his heart, and he did not mind that he was a leading general of an opposing kingdom. Wait a minute. Wonder if there will be a chance to at least say a word to him. Qin Yu had not been able to regain her senses for a long while. Had her senses been wrong? Why does this person feel so familiar to her, like she already knew him from her previous life? But there was something different about this man and that person. Regardless whether it was in terms of outlook or that icy demeanor, they were greatly different. The look in Qin Yu's eyes grew complicated. Could he have been reborn as a completely changed person like she had? No, there couldn't possibly be so many coincidences. It was enough that she had suffered that alone. Her eyelashes fluttered as she blinked, her gaze lowering down slowly. And it was just after that that Qin Yili, who was a far distance away, suddenly turned to look her way. The green eyes dimmed and darkened. Who was the one that was just staring at him? That stare had been so intense that he was not able to ignore it. It was different from all the other gazes filled with curiosity or admiration. That one stare had clearly felt complicated and profound. A pity the other party had already averted his eyes, and hence he was unable to see who it was. The Duke of Vast Seas is just as exceptional as the rumors say. Outstanding flair, a dragon among men. After the Green Wave Kingdom's Emperor's surprise passed, he then heaped words of praise upon Qin Yili, and seeing the young lady beside him thereafter, the Emperor's eyes brightened. This must be the ninth princess, I assume, rightfully deserving of being the Water Edge Kingdom's greatest beauty. Come take your seats. Palace servants came over to lead the guests to their seats, directly opposite Yen Su's table. Although Yen Su could be said to have met Qin Yili before, but over the past 7 years, the man had changed quite a lot, seemingly even more unfathomable than before. Yen Su then recollected his thoughts and raised his cup up to say, Duke of Vast Seas, it's been a long time. Welcome to the Green Wave Kingdom, and let this Duke offer you a toast. Chapter 44. 2. Love snatched away. Qin Yili then turned his gaze back indifferently, and his large hand with clearly distinct joints picked up the incomparably exquisite purple crystal cup, raising it up to empty the cup down his throat before his magnetic and faintly cold voice that very rarely said much sounded. Thank you. A series of sighs sounded down below. The Duke of Vast Seas was really as arrogant and cold as the rumor said. Seeing that, Uxin Yen smiled elegantly and went on to raise her wine cup as well. Thank you for the Duke of Eternal Peace and the Emperor's generous hospitality. As the Duke of Vast Seas does not often attend such functions, I hereby plead for forgiveness if we've shown any discourtesy. Xin Yen shall drink up first as a show of respect. Warming up the awkward atmosphere without batting an eyelid. She was the Water Edge Kingdom's most revered princess, and although she was doted upon and greatly indulged in the Water Edge Kingdom, where she was still a rather childish and mischievous little lady in private back home, her great flair as the princess of a kingdom was not just for show, the way she handled herself and her candid personality bringing about a refreshing wave to wash over the people. That there was the true flair of nobility, a grand magnanimous air that came from right in her bones. Because of that, the Green Wave Emperor liked her very much, and Yen Su also showed a sliver of a smile on his face, greatly admiring the ninth princess he had heard so much about. And Yen Ning Luo, who was seated in the first row among the womenfolk, held quite a complicated-looking gaze right at that moment. For no other reason than the fact that Qin Yili had always rejected anyone from getting physically close to him. Even when he suffered heavy injuries back, he had not allowed anyone to touch him, but had forcibly endured the pain as he applied medicine and bandaged himself, while she merely watched him silently. But at that very moment, that Uxin Yen was however seated right beside him, smiling brightly like a flower. Then, towards Uxin Yen. His feelings were different. That little princess personality is rather great. Qin Yu lowered her head to take a sip of fruit wine, as she said distractedly. From the moment earlier when she saw the Duke of Vast Seas appear, her mind had been a little chaotic. Although she knew that it was completely impossible, she still could not help having her thoughts run wild. The lad beside her was however too excited and did not notice anything peculiar as he whispered softly to her, the Duke of Vast Seas really has a great commanding presence. I admire him so much. No matter how aloof and arrogant he was, Qin Bei felt that that was how a powerful figure should act. Qin Yu shook her head helplessly, her chin resting in her palm, looking highly bored and lazy. Suddenly, goose bumps rose up all over her body, as an incredibly strange and sinister feeling flashed very briefly past her. A shiver ran down her spine and her originally lazy posture immediately straightened, causing Qin Bei to jump as he quickly asked, "What's wrong, sis?" "Nothing. I'm just feeling a little cold all of a sudden." "Oh, a gust of wind must have blown in from someplace." Qin Yu did not say anything more but to turn her body to the side slightly, to look outside the palace hall. The moon hung high up in the sky, and as the All Saints' Day was nearing, the moon had rounded up quite a bit, giving out a lustrous brilliance, hazily beautiful. Just outside the hall, a row of very tall towering trees reached towards the clouds, looking like they were almost reaching the moon, cast several faint shadows. It was very quiet outside, and not even the sound of the wind could be heard, where the trees' branches stood stock still, not moving in the slightest. But just a moment ago, she had clearly felt a chilly gust. Could she be mistaken? Her senses have always been highly accurate. It was better to be a little more wary. Up above, the Green Wave Emperor and several of the high-ranking ministers were chatting with Qin Yili and his group, discussing about the friendly relations between the two kingdoms. They had done enough of the perfunctory pleasantries, and it was time to get into the main topic. Chapter 44. 3. Love snatched away. it is said that the ninth princess came here this time for matchmaking, but wouldn't the ninth princess name alone draw countless young and talented to want to become the Water Edge's ninth son-in-law? It then makes me wonder whether the princess has someone you have in your heart within our Green Wave Kingdom. The Green Wave Emperor's face was highly benevolent, but he actually had some others' thoughts in his heart. Even if the other party had no intention of starting a war with them, they had surely come here with an aim to taunt and challenge them. He did not believe that the Water Edge Kingdom would do something as senseless as to come 1,000 miles all the way to the Green Wave Kingdom just for leisurely sightseeing and fun. Wuxia Yan's face still retained an unassailable smile. Xin Yan has just undergone her coming-of-age ceremony, and I am not exactly that keen to be seeking marriage currently. If someone is to come to win my heart, that person must definitely be someone stronger than I am. She paused a moment after she finished, her gaze turning upon Xianyuan Che, the corners of her mouth lifting up. I hear that this great kingdom's His Highness, the Crown Prince, is the top disciple of the Faint Mist sect leader, and although he is still so young, he has far surpassed many of his seniors' fellow disciples who are older than him. I think he must be a very powerful and talented man. Once those words came out, everyone else were not that calm anymore. What is the Water Edge Kingdom's princess seeking to do here? Her intentions were clear to see, and everyone present knew what she was doing. She couldn't possibly not know that His Highness the Crown Prince and Princess Ning Feng were engaged in marriage, and here she was blatantly fighting for Princess Ning Feng's man. That was just too arrogant, wasn't it? Although she was the princess of another kingdom, she couldn't possibly come in here and flagrantly want to snatch someone else's fiancé so shamelessly. The people in the hall immediately started to try to locate Yan Ning Luo, and they all found her seated right among the womenfolk. However, Yan Ning Luo's demeanor was highly calm and indifferent, not showing the slightest trace of rage from being blatantly challenged in front of everyone, looking steady and unaffected, without even a ripple of emotion. The people could not help but silently admire her. She was their topmost prodigious young lady as expected, as such strong willpower was not something any ordinary person could possess. But how could they possibly know that Yan Ning Luo actually did not have feelings for Xianyuan Che at all, and not to mention there someone was taunting her? It would be best if she could snatch Xianyuan Che away, so she would be able to take the chance to annul the engagement. Qin Yu began to develop a bit of interest towards this highly candid little princess. Does she really like the Crown Prince at all? Why was she feeling that this last true intention was not that simple? As the person directly involved, Xianyuan Che was also startled by those words that felt so much like a confession of her feelings for him. He went on to merely nod his head politely at her, and then said in a gentle voice, "I thank the ninth princess for your strong praise, but my royal person is already engaged in marriage." The rejection was already clear through his words, which also caused all the other ladies who harbored fantasies about Xianyuan Che to have their little hearts broken to pieces onto the ground. With the Crown Prince so deeply in love, it was thought that they all would not stand a chance at all. However, Wuxian Yan just smiled, seemingly completely unaffected. "I know that. So, I only have one request to make, that I hope His Majesty the Emperor would grant." "I wonder what the ninth princess' request is." The Green Wave Emperor had showed that he was equally shocked by Wuxian Yan's feelings for the Crown Prince, but he was also rather curious what her objective really was. "This princess here has never stepped out from the Water Edge Kingdom before for the past 10 over years and have only focused on my cultivation training, hence I would think of myself as slightly above average in my skills. But I have often heard that there is a highly gifted and prodigious young lady in the Green Wave Kingdom, acclaimed to be the most highly skilled among the women of the Green Wave Kingdom, frequently comparing me to this young lady, which has perplexed me quite a bit. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World." Hearing those words come out from her, Yan Ning Luo's gaze deepened, seemingly having already guessed what she was going to say next. As expected, Wuxian Yan's next statement, that was delivered with a disarming smile, said, "I am also very curious, between me and this prodigious young lady in this great kingdom, who stands a notch higher. Hence, I have come here to issue a challenge to her." Uxin Yen had a small and petite figure, with mischievous and adorable looks. But if you were taken in by her looks, you would have already lost. The lass was one who possessed strong battle lust through and through, and many of the Water Edge Kingdom's men were not her match. Chapter 45. 1. Duel between Prodigies. Now, she had just opened her mouth and she was already challenging the Green Wave Kingdom's greatest lady Prodigy, which shocked quite a number of people while getting them excited. The corners of Xianyuan Che's mouth curled up and the expression on his face showed a moment of rarely seen mirth. The young lady's daring confession just now was actually hiding her real motive, which was to challenge Yan Ning Luo. That's very interesting. He was also very curious what kind of a scene it would be to have the two women face off. The Green Wave Emperor was a little taken aback, never having thought that her request would be this. He then immediately turned to look questioningly at the Duke of Eternal Peace Yen Su sitting still and upright directly below him, who then returned his gaze with a calm and composed smile. The young pretty lady in blue then turned her eyes around to look towards the tables of the womenfolk, her gaze resting upon Yan Ning Luo, who possessed a countenance that could ruin cities, whose expression was calmly indifferent, and she asked with a smile, "I wonder if I may have the honor to be able to pit my skills against Princess Ning Feng." Yan Ning Luo's expression did not change as she stood up from her seat, her eyes unconsciously drifting into the middle of the group of the Water Edge Kingdom's emissaries, to look at the man in a deep red robe and silver hair that was like snow, and her gaze deepened as she slowly said, "I'll be glad to oblige." "Sis, who do you think will win?" Qing Bei was getting excited watching. Although the Water Edge Kingdom's 9th princess looked rather petite and weak, but the fact that her fame was able to match Yan Ning Luo's meant that her cultivation level would not be all that low. With these two prodigies facing each other, it was not known how big a sensation it was going to cause. The corners of Qing Yu's mouth tugged slightly, but she did not reply. For some unknown reason, her heart was feeling rather ill at ease. The palace hall was vast and enormous, the large space in the middle originally meant for performances, but now, it would be just right for the contest. The moment Yan Ning Luo stepped onto the stage, the air of indifference on her suddenly turned menacing, as a faint greenish glow shone out around her body. The light upon Uxin Yen was blue, and within that, there was also a slight vicious hint of glowing purplish lightning. The light upon a pugilist's body represented their elemental attributes. Like the green light on Yan Ning Luo's body showed that she was of the wood element, and Uxin Yen was a rare dual elemental attribute pugilist, possessing both the water and lightning elements. A pugilist's cultivation element were classified into metal, wood, water, fire, earth, ice, lightning, light, and darkness, 9 elemental attributes, with light and darkness being the rarest among the elemental attributes. It was said that one would not find even a single person possessing these two attributes, and the next two most rare attributes would be ice and lightning, which were most dominating and aggressive, attributes that belonged to the powerful attack category. And Uxin Yen possessed the lightning element among the more aggressive attributes, and she was a dual-element pugilist, which was highly powerful. It was already considered hard for a pugilist to be able to cultivate a single element to its peak, but not only had she cultivated 2 elemental attributes, she was able to immerse lightning within water, melding the 2 elements as one. This clearly showed that both elements had already been cultivated to extremely great heights. Yan Ning Luo's wood element was not that weak as well, belonging to the attack and healing category. So even if she got injured, her body would quickly begin to heal automatically, and it could be said that that was as good as possessing a second life. But encountering a dual-element pugilist, it would still be rather hard on her. The people down below could not help but break out in cold sweat, worrying for her. The person we saw that day is indeed the 9th princess. This little princess is definitely not simple. To think that she possessed such strong powers at such a young age. I am guessing that Princess Ning Feng will have a hard time here. Yu Jingzhuo was seated a few tables away from Xianyuan Che, and his voice clearly reached the crown prince at that moment. He had clearly used covert voice transmission and only the two of them can hear it. Xianyuan Che then sneered. This shows you still do not understand Yan Ning Luo well. That woman is not as simple as you think she is either, the water runs very deep. Oh. You understand her so well. And you say you do not have any interest in her. I am merely stating facts, and it has nothing to do with whether I have any interest in her. You do not need to explain. I know everything. You know bull. Chapter 45. 2. Duel between prodigies up on the stage, because when two pugilists duel, fearing any tricks or interference from others, and to prevent the fight from coming to harm anyone, an isolation barrier would automatically be formed around the duelists. Hence, no matter how shocking or terrifying it got in there, the people outside the barrier would not be affected. Uxin Yen looked every inch just like an adorable and obedient little lass, but when she started to fight with people, she became an entirely different person, her eyes turning to look dominating and incisive, filled with excitement and fervor. The moment she struck, it was always with incredibly terrifying and powerful moves. Yan Ning Luo did not face her head-on and just dodged all of those ferocious moves one after another, seemingly on the retreat the entire way. What's going on? Why doesn't Princess Ning Feng fight back? She is just being pummeled the entire way. The ninth princess is really very strong, and it feels like she is more powerful than Princess Ning Feng. I think Princess Ning Feng might be losing this time. She isn't even able to retaliate at all. The ninth princess is just too strong, her strikes quick and vicious, which is almost completely indefensible. Sigh, looks like our Green Wave Kingdom will be losing face this time. Yan Ning Luo, why are you not fighting back? Are you looking down on me? Uxin Yen was getting a little angry. She had come to the Green Wave Kingdom in order to have the winner determined between her and this woman claimed to be the Green Wave's greatest prodigy. She hadn't expected that the woman would not even hit back, which infuriated her greatly. Yan Ning Luo dodged the punch that had lightning wrapped around it and said, "A martial arts contest is always determined by merely landing the first hit. Is there a need to fight like only one of us can live?" Uxin Yen sneered. "But I insist on determining who is stronger between us. Or could it be that your fame as the greatest woman prodigy of the Green Wave Kingdom is just a farce? Isn't there anyone else in this Green Wave Kingdom? That they even need a woman like you to keep up appearances?" Yan Ning Luo's expression turned cold. The ninth princess must remember the saying that trouble stems from the mouth. Ha! It's little wonder why Big Brother Yili very nearly destroyed the Green Wave Kingdom 7 years ago. What kind of a strongest kingdom is this? If this is all there is to it. Uxin Yen kept saying words that taunted and challenged Yan Ning Luo, seeking to anger her to use her real power in this duel, and not merely keep dodging. After she said that, a clear change could be felt in the aura around Yan Ning Luo's body. The ninth princess was delighted, thinking that she had finally riled the woman enough for her to get serious. But what she did not know was that it wasn't her words of challenge that angered Yan Ning Luo at all, but the way she had called Qin Yili Big Brother. Yan Ning Luo's clear and pretty eyes suddenly became incredibly chilly. They had already become so close and are on such intimate terms. Big Brother Yili, tisk. She would never allow the man that she had loved for so many years to be involved with any other woman. Even if she was a princess of an entire kingdom, it was still completely unforgivable. People who knew Yan Ning Luo well all knew the young lady was always mature and steady, her personality indifferent and cold, never easy to rage. But at that moment, the boundless rage that was suddenly rising out from her shocked many of them, thinking that the ninth princess must have said something unpardonable to enrage Yan Ning Luo to such an extent. And just as everyone were overcome with shock and surprise, they then saw the green glow around Yan Ning Luo's body suddenly change, to actually rise with another brilliant and fiery red, scorchingly hot. That was the fire element. With that, everyone froze, absolutely stunned in place. Yan Ning Luo was also a dual element wielder. And the elements she wielded were of two completely opposing attributes. The fire element was flashy and dominating, while the wood element was more gentle and reserved. And Yan Ning Luo had miraculously come to possess the ability to wield these two elements. A prodigious young lady indeed. There's so much more in her than she lets on. As I've said, Princess Ning Feng could not possibly be so weak. Chapter 45. 3. Duel between Prodigies. So she had not been serious about it all this time. Is the duel only just starting for real now? With such gifted talent, it's no wonder that the Faint Mist sect favors her so much. It is said that Princess Ning Feng's birth characters shows she is born to live like a phoenix, highly noble and to be revered. She has really hidden her abilities so deeply, as it turns out, she's a dual element wielder. Did you know about this before? Yu Jinghua continued to transmit his voice to Shen Yuanche. The latter's face was completely calm, seemingly not surprised in the slightest. I didn't know. You're the crown prince indeed. You don't know anything but was still able to act as if nothing escapes you. I really have to take my hat off to you. Yu Jinghua teased with a laugh. The eyes of the Green Wave Emperor up in the high seat also flashed with a glint, and he said to Yen Su. To think that that last little Ning is actually a dual element wielder of the fire and wood elements. Did my favored vassal know of this? Yen Su's face was one of stunned surprise, and it was clear that he did not know about the matter at all. The Green Wave Emperor smiled in satisfaction. With a daughter like this, my favored vassal is really fortunate. Little Ning is truly blessed to live her life like a phoenix. It seems like she would definitely be of great help to our Green Wave Kingdom in future. Your Majesty is too generous with his praise. Yen Su said humbly, though he was smiling as well. Are you finally willing to duel with me seriously now? Uxin Yen asked with an eyebrow raised as she looked at the woman whose body was exuding a chilling battle lust, and the smile at the corners of her mouth deepened. Then let me the one to crush your title as the greatest prodigy. Upon finishing those words, the light blue figure turned into a blur in an instant, delivering a strike straight towards Yan Ning Luo with blazing speed. Yan Ning Luo's demeanor remained indifferent, but at that moment, she felt that she needed to defeat her young opponent, to let that man know that only her, Yan Ning Luo, was qualified to stand at his side. The limpid pair of clear and incisive eyes immediately almost felt as if flames had flickered to life within, the scorching fervor felt by the crowd of people outside the arena. Looks like the ninth princess might just lose this time. Ah Jean stood on one side, and lamented regretfully. Her fire elemental attributes were evidently more powerful than the wood element she had revealed before. Since the beginning of time, water overcomes fire. But fire joined with the wood element with its unmatchable defense, it would not fear water at all, but would instead be able to completely suppress the water element. Qin Yili had not paid too much attention to the duel on the platform but had merely occasionally taken a glance at it through half-narrowed eyes. The only reason he had come here this time was because of Uxin Yen's persistent soft pleading and hard wheedling, and together with the fact that he wanted to investigate for any information about little Yu. Hence, he wasn't all that keen in their contest. There's just too many people. It will not be easy to take action. The male voice was as sinister, and just as lifeless as before. I must sniff definitely that person out or I will never give up. The voice of the person under the hood was filled with hatred. Committing the sin of killing too many people in these low-level lands will incur the wrath of heaven. And limitation laws exist here that limits our cultivation, where we are unable to fully use our powers. Humph. Then find a way to lure him out. I must have him killed. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. The man's deathly pale face was expressionless as his vacant eyes suddenly turned. There will be a huge festival here the day after tomorrow. It will surely be messy with the bustle then. It will be the best time to strike at that time. Alright, we'll do as you say. Qin Yu did not understand why she was feeling so much in a daze tonight, so sleepy with everything in a haze. In the end, another sinister feeling gust of wind blew past behind her and her body shook with a quiver, immediately feeling a lot more awake. That was the second time. She had definitely not been mistaken. Her alluring eyes then darkened. It was feared that someone or something had their eyes fixed on her. Chapter 46. 1. It's been a long time. Yen Ning Luo was really terrifying when she became serious. The Faint Mist sect often held contests among their sect's inner disciples and she had always gotten first place every year. Moreover, the sect leader would also arrange for them to go out for rigorous training and her accumulated battle experience was definitely stronger than Wuxia Yen. In the end, with just one wrong move, Wuxia Yen was struck on the shoulder and blood churned within her, causing her to fall down from midair. Yen Ning Luo stopped the moment she struck a hit and did not make any more moves. In a show of righteousness, she walked up to her opponent and extended her hand. Appreciate that you've let me win, ninth princess. Wuxia Yen was dazed for a moment before she pulled on her hand to stand up. Having been defeated, she was not feeling dejected or depressed but was instead showing a sweet smile. Yen Ning Luo, you're indeed very strong, a proper prodigy through and through. Being praised, Yen Ning Luo did not show the slightest arrogance. I am 2 years older than the ninth princess and when the ninth princess reaches my age, you will probably be stronger than I am now. Wuxia Yen smiled. Then we'll battle again at that time. It's a deal. Yen Ning Luo agreed to it, and her gaze then drifted over to Qin Yili on its own, to discover that he had not been paying attention to the fight at all but was instead looking rather distracted, his mind elsewhere. Yen Ning Luo could not help but feel a wave of disappointment wash over her. It was Wuxia Yen who then carefreely pulled her over towards her own seat and said, "From now on, you are a friend of Wuxia Yen." She went on to turn to Qin Yili and said, "Big brother Yili, she's really a prodigy. Huh, I have finally found a girl who is stronger than me." Standing at such a close distance right before the person that she loves, Yen Ning Luo froze for an instant at that moment. If not for the fact that she was born with a cold and indifferent personality who didn't show strong fluctuation in her emotions, she would surely have turned red, her heart beat wildly, and became an embarrassing sight. Qin Yili merely lifted his eyes up to glance expressionlessly at her and then grunted an indifferent acknowledgement without saying anything else. Seeing him show such a lack of interest, Wuxia Yen turned around apologetically and said, "Big brother Yili is always like this. Although he always acts so cold, he is actually a very good person." But Yen Ning Luo did not mind his cold and indifferent demeanor at all, as that person was just being who he was. Her gaze looking straight at the man, she then broke into a highly enchanting smile and said, "Qin Yili, it's been a long time." The smile of a beauty could very well bring ruin upon cities and kingdoms. Not to mention it was coming from Yen Ning Luo who possessed looks of unmatched beauty with such an icy demeanor, a smile that was so rare to see, so precious it was to be treasured. It was such a clean and uninhibited smile that even Yu Xiaoning who had always been close to her had never seen it before. And it was just that one highly casual statement from her that had everyone stunned in shock. She had actually addressed the Duke of Vast Seas by his name. And with a tone that was so familiar, like they had known each other from a long time ago. But that smile of hers was thought-provoking enough. It had seemed like her fiancé was His Highness the Crown Prince, wasn't it? But that gaze filled with such gentleness, that was exactly the kind of gaze one gave when gazing upon one's beloved. Shen Yuanche saw that unusual scene, and seemed to suddenly understand something. Back on the day when they had come across the incident where there was an assassination attempt on the Duke of Vast Seas, when Yen Ning Luo heard his voice, she had immediately come rushing out from inside the pleasure boat and looking rather worked up, as she relentlessly asked for that man's location. So, her feelings towards the Duke of Vast Seas. It seemed like it had been many years since he had heard anyone call him by his own name. Qin Yi Li's eyes darkened slightly and then gazed straight at Yan Ning Luo. We know each other. Over a span of 8 years, this was the first sentence he had said to her. The arc at the ends of Yan Ning Luo's mouth deepened. Of course we know each other. We knew each other since 8 years ago. Chapter 46. 2. It's been a long time. Qin Yi Li knitted up his brows, seemingly unable to recall that he knew this young lady before him. But before he could finish wondering, he heard the young lady say softly, 8 years ago, in the back mountains behind the faint mist sect, you were injured. Once those words came out, Qin Yi Li was immediately able to recall. He had suffered a backlash when he was ambushed by a surprise attack at the most critical period when he was undergoing a breakthrough into the next level in his cultivation, and he had unconsciously stumbled in a barrier array. It was a little girl who led him out of it and settled him in a remote little hut within the mountains to recuperate. He had stayed there for a period of about 4 to 5 days and left once he recovered from his injuries. Qin Yi Li's attention then came back out from his thought, his dark green eyes looking at the young lady with a measuring gaze. It was you. That was me. Yan Ning Luo nodded and smiled. So, the Duke of Vast Seas and Little Ning are already acquainted? The Green Wave Emperor watched from above for quite a while, before he finally spoke. Many years ago, I was injured from an ambush, and it was all thanks to the helping hand Princess Ning Feng extended to me. I was fine. Qin Yi Li said expressionlessly. Oh. Is that so? Why has Little Ning never mentioned that you are acquainted with the Duke of Vast Seas? The Green Wave Emperor feigned displeasure, but his eyes were filled with joy. He would never have thought that the lass would be acquainted with the Duke of Vast Seas and that she would have saved his life before. Yan Ning Luo smiled faintly. I did not do anything much, and I don't think I had helped all that much. I had not known that he was the Duke of Vast Seas back then, as he had merely told me his name, and had not stated his identity. So I see. The Green Wave Emperor nodded in understanding, but he was already having some other thoughts in his heart. The Duke of Vast Seas as a person, had a cold personality and was adverse to kindly human relations, keeping people far distant, also well known to be cold-blooded and cruel. For many years, besides the 9th Princess Wuxia Yan, there didn't seem to be any other lady who had dared to come close to him. Regardless of the fact that he was highly worshipped and revered, his bloody and brutal ways made people both love and fear him at the same time. But Little Ning had been able to address him directly by name, and was not afraid to speak to him in a calm and composed manner, so it was thought that the relationship between them was definitely not just common acquaintance. It would seem that he would be able to make good use of that. Wuxia Yan then finally managed to be able to react. To think that Big Brother Yi Li actually knows Princess Ning Feng. I had not heard you mention about it before. Qin Yi Li did not say anything, but it was Yan Ning Luo who spoke. I was just a little girl back then, and often remains within the Faint Mist sect. How could he possibly know who I was? That's true. Wuxia Yan smiled and nodded. But it's great that you know each other. I heard that the Green Wave Kingdom's All Saints' Day is happening very soon, and I am looking forward to it very much. It will surely be filled with all kinds of activities and full of fun. If you do not mind, I can bring you guys around the Green Wave Kingdom in the next few days for you to enjoy yourselves thoroughly, to get a feel of the local flavors and customs. Yan Ning Luo had probably smiled less in the past 10 years than she had tonight, showing a fittingly generous smile on her face throughout. Compared to the aloof image of a cold beauty in the past, she was exceptionally a lot more approachable tonight. Everyone in the crowd could not help but whisper under their breath. What could have come over Princess Ning Feng tonight? Always cold and indifferent and suddenly turning to become so warm and gentle, it was really quite hard to get used to it. Xian Yuanche's gaze was tinted with a tinge of irony. Ah, he had thought that the woman was born with that cold and icy expression. So it was only because she had merely not met the right person yet. But what he had never come to expect was that the person she liked was actually the Duke of Vast Seas. That man did indeed possess the capital to make women go mad over him, but for the foolish woman Yan Ning Luo to fall in love with such a heartless man, she was destined to have to suffer. Chapter 46. 3. It's been a long time with a minor interlude where there was a duel between two young ladies. The atmosphere was warmed up quite a bit. After that an incessant stream of lithe and limber-bodied dancers came onto the stage, and classical instruments played while the dancers waved their flowy sleeves in beautiful dance, a beautiful and mesmerizing sight. The Duke of Vast Sea's surname is actually the same as ours. Qing Bei muttered to himself, and then turned to the person beside him. Sis, you. Where is she? The seat beside him was vacant and unoccupied. Qing Bei's eyes grew wide. She was just sitting here a moment ago, why had she suddenly disappeared? And she had not even said a single thing to him. The lad pursed up his lips in thought. He must have gotten too excited tonight when he saw the man he had admired for so long. Qing Bei did not think any further about it and just continued to secretly look at the man who had his head lowered as he sipped at his drink without much expression. At that same moment, with the moon hanging just over their heads, it was silent outside the palace and only the low chirping of insects could be heard. During a midsummer season like this, the night breeze was supposed to make a person feel comfortable. But for some unknown reason, it felt a little chilly, and with the gust of cold wind blowing past her, her dazed and groggy mind seemed to clear up quite a bit. Her beautiful and alluring eyes then narrowed slightly as she looked up at the round moon, a million thoughts going through her mind. Why did she have such an ominous feeling? And it had started only after the people from the Water Edge Kingdom came in. But it did not seem like there could be any kind of link between them, so whose eye could she have drawn upon herself? She usually kept a low profile and she did not remember making any enemies. Ah choo, she shivered and suddenly let out a sneeze. Qing Yu rubbed her nose violently and cursed out softly. Damn it! Who is the scoundrel cursing me? In the cloud heavens east, sat a large family sect with 100-year history. With their amazing skills in elixir cultivation, the family clan helped the dead and healed the injured, assisting the poor and alleviated impoverishment. Their upright and kindly morals gained the praise and approval of the people, known as the Divine Healers, with Bai as the family surname. The current sitting sect leader of the Divine Healers sect was the 17th sect leader, named Bai Qiu, highly skilled in healing, a sage who cared for all under the heavens, and was also Bai Ji Yan's father. But for the father and son who had not seen each other for many years, it seemed their reunion after such a long time wasn't such a happy one. Aye. Father, don't walk away yet. Let me explain. Boom. The great big ancient doors of the Divine Healers sect shut tightly with a boom, very nearly hitting Bai Ji Yan on the nose. Bai Ji Yan was feeling rather melancholy as he turned his head back begrudgingly. What do we do now? We're not even able to get in through the door. Didn't you say that it wouldn't be a problem? Behind him in dominating and flamboyant purple lavish clothes, his facial features deeply handsome looking, wasn't that Luo Junyao in person? Seems like your father does not want to see me, which leads to him not wanting to see you as well. Luo Junyao rubbed at his chin, and came up with that conclusion. Damn it, do I need you to tell me that? Bai Ji Yan could not help but curse out. Then just barge your way in. Luo Junyao said highly casually. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. Bai Ji Yan rolled his eyes. Do you think the Divine Healers sect is a place that anyone can barge into as they like? This place is not part of your territory and there could be countless traps waiting for you inside. I had not been back for so many years and I don't even know if there were any changes made. Luo Junyao raised an eyebrow and went walking forward on his own. He placed his large hand on the door and pushed on it lightly. The door then opened surprisingly. Bai Ji Yan had clearly used almost all his might to push at the door earlier, and he had not been able to move the door an inch. After the door was opened, it was completely silent inside, without even the shadow of a person in there. The place looked completely desolate, like no one had ever lived in that place before. Chapter 47. 1. Mystifying Fog Spirit Bind. With just one look, it was clear that an array had been activated to be a test for them. Luo Junyao arched up an eyebrow. Looks like your father is playing for real this time. Even if we manage to barge through it, we will have to lose a few layers of our skin. It was a type of superior grade array from the divine healers, called the Mystifying Fog Spirit Bind. Just like its name, the fog was thick and heavy, where one would lose all sense of direction upon entering, and there were also all kinds of strange and peculiar things that confused one's mind. With all that said, as long as one had a weakness, they would not be able to pass through safely without being mystified. Having one spirit bound was really no joke, as once a person got trapped in there and did not come out within a day, they would really not be able to come out again. But at that moment, they still had not stepped inside. Bai Qiu's meaning was clear, it was entirely their own choice whether they left or remained. If you are able to last a day inside and not get killed, I will then release you. The deep and commanding voice of a man sounded from afar, reverberating around them. Bai Zhiyan was rather perplexed. Father, there is just me as your one and only son. If I die, your bloodline would be severed. For the divine healers sect to have such a rebellious and traitorous descendant, it might be better with you dead. The voice was harsh and callous, and it disappeared without a trace after saying that. Bai Zhiyan almost wanted to stamp his feet in rage. This father was really just too heartless. Luo Junyao then curled up the ends of his lips in a smirk and went walking inside on his own. Seeing that, Bai Zhiyan, whose feathers were still highly ruffled, quickly hurried to catch up and said worriedly like an old woman, Junyao, you've really come in. If we really come to die in here, it wouldn't matter much if it's just me. But for the great lord of the dark region, how shameful would it be if news of that spread? Luo Junyao's footsteps paused slightly and he glanced back at the man. Who said we will die? Bai Zhiyan was taken aback. Could it be possible you have a plan? Nope. Then why did you come in? Bai Zhiyan was so infuriated his anger knotted up inside. Luo Junyao then smiled mischievously and said in an indifferent voice, isn't there a saying? Good guys finish last. Heaven wouldn't dare to take me. Bai Zhiyan could not find the words in him. That is his style indeed. The two people were separated once they went inside. One couldn't see that to be the case from outside, but once they stepped into the array, that heaven-shrouding great fog would engulf the person completely, unable to see the way forward at all, like one had walked into a maze. Bai Zhiyan was immediately disorientated. And on the other side, it was quite a bit easier for Luo Junyao. That pair of demonic eyes of his were able to penetrate through everything, where nothing in this world could hide from them, and illusions like these would not be able to stop him at all. He put his hands behind his back, and then slowly strolled his way forward, looking highly leisurely. The path in front then suddenly became clearer, the misty fog dissipating away, seeming like he had come through the array so very easily. But Luo Junyao knew that he was not done. Gazing upon a boundless field of snow and glaciers, a flurry of human figures suddenly appeared. There were pitiful cries of help, and the sound of malevolent and sinister laughter, incessantly assaulting his ears as the highly contented expression on Luo Junyao's face suddenly froze. To him, that voice could not be any more familiar. He had not witnessed that scene with his own eyes, but that voice was etched so ever deeply into his memory. Don't. I beg for you to spare my child. I beg you. The tall and brawny figure of that man held a upraised sword in his hand, and he was just about to slash it down upon the highly bulging tummy of the woman. The woman was already completely exhausted, but she still used every single last ounce of her strength to dodge the strike. She was then stabbed deeply in her chest, and garish red blood sprayed over the face and body of the man. Chapter 47. 2. Mystifying Fog Spirit bind a wave of people then suddenly appeared that killed off all those evil people, saving that woman who was only barely breathing. Please. I beg you. Save. My child. The woman's breaths were gossamer thin, her blood-covered hands clasped tightly around the man's hand, her voice coming out in a weak stutter, her life seemingly reaching its very end. I won't live. Save my child. Save him. The other party was thrown into a fluster by that scene. Although he wanted to save her, he did not know how and what he was to do at all. Slice open my stomach. The woman's already slightly glazed over eyes suddenly became incredibly clear and bright, the resolute and incisive gaze shocking to see. In the end, the men followed her wishes and retrieved the child out of her. That woman was already severely wounded, and with this, the woman breathed her very last. The woman was left behind in that field of snow, to forever rest under those grounds, while the child was brought back and adopted by that man. Just before the woman died, she had told him that the child's name was Lu Junyao. His thoughts were then slowly pulled back to the present, that part of his memory filled with endless slaughter and aggrievement. The aura around Lu Junyao became unbelievably violent and brutal, his eyes turning a blood-red color in an instant. But he recovered back to his senses very quickly, his lips curling up into a scornful smile, and continued walking forward seemingly unaffected. All of this was seen by a pair of eyes hidden from sight. How is that possible? He's woken up from it so quickly. That part of his memory should be the biggest dread that plagued his dreams. How could he possibly pull himself out from that so easily? Is it possible that the current him really has no weaknesses? That dreaded dream to Lu Junyao in the past was indeed deeply etched in his memories and utterly unforgettable. But to him now, it did not affect him that much anymore. For no other reason than the fact back when he had just established the Dark Legion, he had already fully eradicated every single one of those people who persecuted his parents, where not one throughout their generations was spared, all of them suffering all kinds of torment till their deaths, and even the young children were not let off as well. He, Lu Junyao, had never been a good person. In fact, if one was to anger him, that person could possibly not ever enjoy a single day of peaceful sleep again. This secretive and mysterious man with a highly eccentric personality would never let his enemies die a quick and painless death, but would dangle them slowly, to leave their hearts hanging by a thread, unable to enjoy peace for any extended period of time. Just as the other party had just started to let down their guard, they would suddenly die under unfathomable circumstances, and the expression on their faces just before they died, would definitely be one of pure terror. There's a saying that went on like this. Vengeance is a dish best served cold. And for a black-bellied and devious man like Lu Junyao, his vengeance was determined by his mood at that time. All in all, anyone who offended him would come to regret that they had ever been born into this world. When Lu Junyao reached further ahead, what met his eyes were many rare and beautiful sights of the world, peerless beauties whose looks could ruin entire cities and kingdoms, and he saw many miraculous elixirs and medicines that could greatly increase one's cultivation. Thankfully, all of that did not tempt Lu Junyao in the slightest. It was till the end when he suddenly found himself passing through a sea of stunningly beautiful flowers. All the red floral blooms swayed gently in the wind, a highly enchanting sight. Lu Junyao suddenly halted his footsteps and his face took on a slightly ugly shade. Darn it! Fallen for it. All the stunning scenery and ravishing beauties he saw when put together with the field of poppies before his eyes made him realize that they were all filled with an almost undetectable fragrance. At that moment, he felt as if all strength had been drained out of him, and even taking a single step was a little hard. By Chio, that sly old fox had really been meticulous and astute, knowing that he would surely be careless. Chapter 47. 3. Mystifying Fog Spirit bind. Lu Junyao's face looked slightly suspicious, and in his heart, he was already quickly thinking up a way to counter it. The Mystifying Fog Spirit bind array was specifically designed to be used against powerful pugilists with high and profound cultivation, and hence, if one were to forcefully resist it, not only would it not have any effect at all, their cultivation powers would slowly be weakened by the array. Even if they did manage to escape out of the array in the end, they would be in a state that was no different from useless trash. The man, tall and slender frame, stood ramrod straight in his spot, not as weak as what the man hidden from sight was thinking, but was instead looking like he was handling the situation with ease. It seemed that over so many years, his character had changed more than just a bit, to become a lot calmer and much more composed. People who initially step into the array would not know the secret behind it, and the harder they fought in resistance, the stronger the opposite effect would be. And although the man was already affected by the effects of the drug where his movements had become a little sluggish, he did look like he was feeling unwell in any other way. Hence it could be seen that he was not about to put up any resistance, showing that his powers of perception were rather astounding. On the other side, Bai Zhiyan's fortune was not that great. As the heir of the divine healers, he was born with a body immune to poison. Although possessing outstanding skills in medicine and holding quite a significant level of cultivation, he failed to realize in the slightest of the fact that the harder he resisted, the stronger he was being suppressed. What he faced were a bunch of mindless puppets who knew no exhaustion. The only thing they knew were to carry out their orders, to attack Bai Zhiyan relentlessly. He had initially been able to deal with them easily, till thereafter, he discovered that the more viciously he struck, the retaliation from the puppets would attack him with twice the force. As a result, there were quite a few injuries on his body at that moment, looking rather wrecked and wretched. The sect leader of the divine healers, Bai Qiu, who was fuming at Bai Zhiyan's disappointing performance, suddenly had his attention pulled back by a surprised cry beside his ear. What did he just eat? How is that possible? He is actually able to move. Although the divine healer's sect's third elder Bai Li was already a few hundred years old, his personality was still loud and boisterous. Whenever he saw something unbelievable, he would always exclaim loudly like this, his eyes wide as he stared. Bai Qiu had his attention focused on his own worthless son, and he did not see what Lu Junyao did. He turned to look quizzically at Bai Li and asked, "What happened?" Bai Li's face was still highly agitated. "That kid just ate an elixir and I saw it very clearly. Not only is he able to move after taking the elixir, but look at him now. He is not affected by any hallucinations from the miasma of poison in the air. Once he finds the eye of the array, he will then come right out from it." Bai Li was fanatical about elixirs and medicines, always locking himself inside the elixir cultivation room to fiddle around with all kind of strange and peculiar prescriptions. The poison in the array were set up by him personally, and it could be said when it came to poison techniques, none in the divine healers sect were able to compare to him. And he had not devised an antidote for the poisons he concocted, as they were meant to be used upon enemies. But now, just one single elixir pill and it had completely dispelled his poison. It was just too unbelievable. Is that even possible? Bai Qiu was equally surprised. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. When he turned his gaze over there, he saw the regally dressed man with his flawless countenance, the corners of his lips curled up with an indifferent smile as he stretched his long and slender fingers out to pluck off an exceptionally adorable and pretty little beauty that was weeping among the flowers. It turned out to be a red lotus whose shape resembled a young girl weeping with her hands over her face. That's right. That was exactly where Bai Li, who had a highly wicked sense of humor, had set the eye of the array at. With the eye of the array destroyed, the illusory world then seemed to undergo an apocalypse, crumbling away inch by inch, to then fall away and disappear till there was not a single trace left. Bai Qiu's gaze then turned to look beside him. The stick of incense was just burning out its very last bit, and the ashes then fell. Chapter 48. 1. Worry. This man had really taken just one incense stick's time to walk out from the powerful array of the divine healers sect that had killed countless powerful pugilists, and he was coming out from it without a single scratch on him. In contrast, having been suddenly rescued from the array, Bai Zhiyan was still in a battle stance, his face covered with blotches of black and blue, and a trickle of blood seeping down from the corner of his mouth. All the puppets before him had suddenly disappeared. He stood there dazed for an instant, thinking that some other demonic monsters was about to come. Upon seeing Lu Junyao not far away from him, looking leisurely and completely at ease, he then woke up to the fact that he was already out from the array. But, why does that fellow look like there isn't even a single scratch on him? That is just too much. He had been beaten up so badly inside and in the end, had that scoundrel just toured one round inside and came right out from there. Bai Zhiyan immediately felt as if a knife had just been stabbed into his heart. However, more was to come that would prick at his heart. Here he was having just undergone a vicious battle, his body carrying glorious badges of honor. His heart finally felt a tinge of consolation as he saw Bai Qiu walking towards them from the front with several of the Divine Healer's sex elders. But the entire group of them did not seem to have noticed him at all as they walked right past him before his eyes. The smiling face that Bai Zhiyan had just lifted up then froze. Frantically turning his head around, he saw the entire group of people walking over to Lu Junyao as he had thought, the expressions on their faces looking pleasantly surprised. Even the inflexible and stern-faced Bai Qiu's face was looking very warm and receptive. Whoa whoa whoa. Could he possibly have been merely a child his father had picked up from the streets all this time? Kid, what is that supreme grade elixir that you ate? I clearly saw that you were already completely immobilized just now. Bai Li asked, his face highly excited, his large eyes sparkling exceptionally bright, almost like two bright twinkling stars. Lu Junyao curled up his lips and replied very casually. It's nothing. Just a gift from a friend whom I met in the lower realms. He really had not thought that that little fox's skill in medicine would be so exceptional, capable of dispelling even the poison from the Divine Healer's sect so easily, and he could not help but recall what she had said back then. Able to dispel most poisons. But surely the Divine Healer's sect were not at the level of most. Once those words came out, the group of people were all in shock. If those words had been uttered out from Bai Zhiyan's mouth, they would all have thought that he was just joking. But though the person before their eyes would seem to be a mere child, but he was after all a reigning lord over an entire region in cloud heaven, hence words that came out from his mouth was a whole lot more credible. There is actually someone with such exceptional skills in medicine in the lower realm? Bai Qiu's brows knitted up tightly together. Suddenly seeming to realize something, the expression on his face became startled. The poison in your body has been purged. Not only has the poison been purged, even the blood curse has been completely cleaned right up. Bai Zhiyan was finally able to say something and the expression on his face was one of glee. Let me tell all of you. That person possesses the greatest skills in medicine I have ever seen, where even great-grandfather back in his day might not be as gifted as this person. Besides having been the new sect leader of the Divine Healers, Bai Zhiyan was also the most gifted among them all, his personality insufferably arrogant, where very few would be able to make him admire them so much like this. Hence, it just made everyone even more curious and they opened their mouths to ask, could it be a reclusive sage from cloud heaven who went into the lower realm? Haha, reclusive sage. A young lady who is not even yet 14. You've got to be pulling my leg. Bai Zhiyan said with a laugh. Just stop throwing blind guesses around like this. That person is from the lower realm but possesses terrifying talent. Though it seems those medical skills do not follow the same path as that of the Divine Healer's sect, but it looks to me that it is even more brilliant. Chapter 48. 2. Worry this time, even the ever-stern-faced Bai Qiu whose emotions did not show on his face was suddenly displaying a shocked demeanor. A young girl not yet 14. It was different for him unlike Yi Li and the others who were half in disbelief but his mind seemed to drift off to a very far away place, like he could faintly recall something but just could not be sure. A girl who possessed such heaven-defying and incredulous gift despite being just so young in age. There was actually a precedent of that right here in cloud heaven before. But this had happened down there in the lands of a lower realm. That would really cause one to have to think deeply about it. Bai Qiu's face darkened a little and then turned to look at Lu Junyao. Come with me. And then just turned around to walk away upon saying that. Lu Junyao arched up an eyebrow, but listened to Bai Qiu and followed behind him. Leaving Bai Zhiyan to stand there in bewilderment by himself. Why has my father asked Junyao to go there? I'll just go with them. Ow. Third elder, what are you doing? Bai Zhiyan shielded his face and jumped one big step backwards, to look on in horror at the group of people smiling at him. Suddenly poking at his face where he had been injured for no good reason, do they think it's funny? Bai Li's face split into a highly disarming smile. Look at your swollen and badly bruised face. Come to my room and let me apply medicine on it first. It was not known whether it was due to Bai Zhiyan having taken liberties with too many women, but his imagination immediately ran rather rich and wild. Upon hearing Bai Li's words, his face turned pale and he quickly said indignantly, apply medicine if you must, but why do I need to go to your room? Has the third elder come to develop other kinds of special interest besides researching into medical prescriptions over the years? Bai Li was stunned by Bai Zhiyan's highly aggrieved look as he exclaimed out so loudly, and it took him a long while before he came back to his senses. I saw you covering your face earlier and I guessed that you must be quite badly hurt. How can I apply medicine for you properly if you do not go lie down in my room? And what kind of special interest are you talking about? The expression on Bai Zhiyan's face turned stiff and feeling incredibly awkward, he coughed lightly. It's nothing. Let's go have medicine applied then. And he then took off so swiftly like there was wind under his feet, as if there was a pack of wolves after him. Bai Li's face was still looking completely bewildered, a little stumped, but he still went on to open his mouth to say helpfully. Kid. My room is in the southern side. Where are you running off to going north? It's only toilets up there. Bai Zhiyan's fast-moving feet stumbled. On the other side, Bai Qiu brought Lu Junyao to come to the meeting hall. This place was usually only opened up when there was a big incident or an highly important matter. But Bai Qiu had brought him here because the Grand Meeting Hall was the Divine Healer's sect's most protected place, and also the most private. After Bai Qiu brought the man to the place, he had just asked for the man to wait a moment, and before he had even walked away, the man's languid-sounding voice already rose to say indifferently, no need for all that trouble. You can come close to this body of mine now. Bai Qiu's footsteps halted, feeling rather incredulous. Back when this man was afflicted by that poison, his temperament had undergone a drastic change and his body constitution had become exceptionally terrifying. Not to mention humans, even objects devoid of life would disintegrate in nothing at his hands. But right before his eyes, he saw the man sitting leisurely in the main seat in the hall, in that chair made from the highest grade of rosewood, his long slender fingers toying with the leaves of the evergreen bonsai plant beside him. It must be known that all the furniture like tables, chairs, and even the bed in his room had to be made with special materials. It could be imagined just how powerful and damaging the aura emanating out from him had been back then. Whenever Bai Qiu came to diagnose his condition back then, he had had to put on clothes and gloves that could isolate him from that aura. This would be the first time that he was coming into such close contact with the man. Back when he had brought him back as a child, he had been so tiny. To think that he would grow up to reach such a profound and unfathomable stage today, Bai Qiu could not help but feel a slight twinge in his heart. Chapter 48. 3. Worry hidden in that man's body, was an extremely powerful force that revolved around his heart's meridian. This meant that even if he were to be poisoned again in future, that powerful force would be able to suppress the poison very quickly, that would ensure that he would remain safe and sound for half a month's time. In the few hundred years that Bai Qiu had lived, he had never seen anything so amazing, and his astute pair of eyes glinted with a bright sparkle. The methods of that young lady from the low-level lands are highly unique and different, employing ways completely unlike to those of our Divine Healer's sect, and it is clear that they are superior to ours. Bai Qiu said with endless praise. Young and promising indeed. If she's here in our cloud heaven, she will surely go very far. What a pity. Lu Junyao let out a low laugh. Is Uncle Bai feeling rueful for such an outstanding talent? It's really rare that anyone can make you see them in such a favorable light. Truly a prodigy. At that moment, Bai Qiu's heart was moved by that young girl he had not even met before, and his face could not help but sink slightly. You were afflicted with that poison for close to 100 years, and not that it's suddenly been dispelled. I fear the hidden hands behind it would surely not just sit back calmly. I think that young lass would most probably meet with misfortune. Lu Junyao's face immediately congealed up. What do you mean? The person who brought harm upon you was trying to control you and not to take your life. The blood curse in your body is named the emotion-devouring curse, and as its name says, it is able to cause a person to become completely devoid of feelings and incapable of love, but to only heed the orders of the person indicated by the one who laid the curse. The price to pay for laying such a curse is extremely great. Not only will it cause the person who laid the curse to forever remain only under darkness and never to see the light of day again, it would take a very heavy toll upon that person's body. Can you then tell me, for someone who paid such a heavy price to suddenly find the curse they laid had been broken by someone, how deep a hatred would they feel? The shade of Lu Junyao's face immediately looked rather ugly upon hearing those words. If that was true, wouldn't he have implicated the little fox and dragged her into all this? Although her battle powers might not necessarily be inferior to her medical skills, but the enemy was from Cloud Heaven after all. Any child here with average skills in martial arts would be able to hang up and beat a powerful pugilist from the mid-leveled White Fun lands, what's more for that most insignificant and lowest-leveled land. Lu Junyao shot up from his seat with a whoosh to his feet. It should have been about 20 days since he came back to Cloud Heaven, and he did not know how the little fox was doing right at that moment. If she had really come to any harm because of him. Uncle Bai, I came here this time because I wanted you to check the source of the emotion-devouring curse. From what that young lady told me, back when she was dispelling the curse for me, she was attacked by the other party, and it made me think that it was an intentional act from someone. Lu Junyao's brows furrowed slightly. In the several days since he came back, he had already summoned back most of his people from the dark regions. He had Mei Ji and the others holding the fort now, and he wasn't all that worried about anyone daring to come up to their door to stir trouble. His mind was in fact feeling more worried for that tiny little fox. At that moment, Lu Junyao might not know why he, who had always done as he pleased and went anywhere he wanted, would suddenly come to worry about a person's well-being and safety. Sometimes, weren't there certain things that actually came about just from mere interest? The All Saints' Day that happened once every 3 years. The scene that night was different from usual. It wasn't the 15th of the month, but the moon was large and round, with faint traces of gold and red light swirling over its surface, looking incredibly elegant and mysterious. I heard that Princess Ning Feng was born on All Saints' Day, a day we celebrate with such a grand festival. She truly possesses the life like that of a phoenix from the day she was born. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. She is already the Green Wave Kingdom's greatest lady prodigy, and added to that, with such a unique and incredibly noble birth characters, it will be hard to find many women who can match a lady like her. Seated within a horse carriage that was driving slowly towards the Imperial Palace, many of such statements could be heard. A young lady with a countenance of peerless beauty, a pair of beautiful and long narrow eyes like a phoenix's, stared with a measured gaze into the dark night scene, before she then softly pulled down the carriage's curtains. Born to live her life like a phoenix. Ha, a blood-red full moon has always been an ominous omen. Chapter 49. 1. Weapon Spirit awakens. Inside the vast Imperial Palace Hall, all seats were already completely filled. For the All Saints' Day this time, everyone in the Imperial capital had been looking forward to it very much. Because it was only on the All Saints' Day that there wouldn't be any differentiation between ranks or positions. Even for the children from common families, as long as they were capable enough to pass the initial test, would have the right to come into the Imperial Palace, to duel with members of nobility, where they might finally be fortunate enough to become the festival's male saint or female saint, to be elevated right up among the clouds in one step, gaining the Emperor's favor. But that was just a beautiful daydream. As the female saint every single time the festival came around was always Yan Ning Luo, the greatest lady prodigy in the Green Wave Kingdom, who was accepted into the Faint Mist sect more than 10 years ago when they came here personally to recruit her and was now a highly favored inner disciple in there. Even within the Faint Mist sect where powerful pugilists were a dime a dozen, Yan Ning Luo's name was always seen on their ranking chart and was even steadily near the front ranks. And the position of male saint had always been taken by Xianyuan Che, which had the people always saying those two were indeed a match made in heaven, with their powers equally strong and profound. The three great sects had always been secretly fighting to gain the top position, and although the Faint Mist sect had been standing a notch above to hold the leading position among the sects, the Limitless sect and the Carefree Valley were not just any laid-back and insignificant bunch as well. They had been biding their time and building their strength over the past few years, and their might was hard to determine now. This year's All Saints' Day could very well be the year that would see some change. As the Green Wave Kingdom's past male and female saints, the duty of receiving important guests had naturally fallen onto the shoulders of Yan Ning Luo and Xianyuan Che. Although Yan Ning Luo was just recently come of age, but the calm and steady air surrounding her made it very difficult for people to not consider her age, as they were all unconsciously subdued by her, completely bowled over. With her standing beside the crown prince of the kingdom Xianyuan Che, she did not pale in comparison in the very least. I have never seen you so eager in all the previous years. Xianyuan Che's gentle voice sounded beside her, tinged with an indecipherable tone. Yan Ning Luo had just greeted one of her fellow junior disciple, and when she turned around to hear these words, she was taken aback a moment. The corners of her lips then lifted very slightly. What? How am I different in previous years? Xianyuan Che's eyes darkened, and he did not face her as he answered her question. That man Qin Yili, it is better you do not get too close to him. Could His Highness the Crown Prince be jealous? Yan Ning Luo said with a burst of laughter. I know better than you what kind of a man he is. Rest assured. I am still holding the name of being the Crown Prince Consort, and I will not attract gossip to your name. But. She paused a moment, and then leaned in closer, and her voice stifled low so only the two of them could hear. Do you know why I do not like you? Why? That was something that Xianyuan Che actually did not understand. He had initially not detested this woman, but whenever they came to meet each other, she was always showing such a great lack of interest. As the crown prince of a kingdom, how many countless women would long so much for just a glance from him? But only this woman here avoided him like he was a poisonous scorpion. That caused him, who had initially held a little liking for her, to turn into abhorrence. No man existed that would be able to tolerate having their fiancé treat them with such an attitude. As time went by, the two of them then grew to detest the sight of each other. Ha! By now, I am not afraid to tell you. Yan Ning Luo suddenly broke into a smile. For the always cold and aloof little beauty to break into a smile like this, it was absolutely stunning. To the eyes of outsiders, they might think that the engaged couple were whispering sweet words to each other, and the young beauty's smile was just so moving. But only Xianyuan Che seemed to hear the young lady's cold voice whisper softly beside his ear. Qin Yi Li. He is the destined one for me. I was only just 8 when I saw him for the very first time. But for as long as I can remember, this person had appeared in my dreams so frequently, and it was when he appeared right before my eyes that I came to realize that those dreams had all been real. Chapter 49. 2. Weapon Spirit Awakens, but I am currently still carrying the position of the Green Wave Kingdom's Crown Prince Consort. Yan Ning Luo's expiration had suddenly darkened. And I hate this identity of mine, and I hate you even more. All these years in the Faint Mist clan, I have been striving to make myself become stronger, only because I want to be able to stand beside this man one day. Now that the chance has come, once I become this year's female saint, I will propose to His Majesty that we should call off the engagement between us. The expression on Shen Yuanche's face was a little startled, but he still suppressed his own voice to whisper. Have you gone mad? Yan Ning Luo, Qin Yi Li is from the water edge. Not to mention that we are two opposing kingdoms, how do you think his fame as a god of slaughter had come about? I do not care. Yan Ning Luo turned around, her slender frame looking highly arrogant and aloof. It won't be easy to stand by his side, but I will not back off from it. Shen Yuanche had still wanted to say something more but someone suddenly tapped him on the shoulder. Che, what kind of secret are the two of you whispering between yourselves? Mo Fei Ran had come into the Imperial Palace with High General Mo and he had taken his leave from his grandfather when he spotted Shen Yuanche, coming over to look for him. Shen Yuanche held his tongue when he saw Mo Fei Ran but the shade of his face darkened. What happened here? Little Ning, did you quarrel with the Crown Prince again? Mo Fei Ran asked puzzledly when he saw the unfriendly look on Shen Yuanche's face. Nothing like that. Cousin, since you're here, you should accompany the Crown Prince. Yan Ning Luo said coldly, and then turned to walk away, leaving Mo Fei Ran to stand there baffled. Shen Yuanche's eyes narrowed slightly. She had walked off so suddenly naturally because she had spotted the people from the Water Edge Kingdom, who were just coming into the palace together with Qin Yi Li. On the other side, as Qin Yu was not supposed to be able to walk in public, he sat obediently in his wheelchair. No matter how curious he was, eager to have a look around the place, there was nothing he could do but to restrain the stir in his heart at that moment. Qin Yu beside him was still wearing that plain and simple white dress, where even the little palace maids that passed them occasionally were more finely dressed than she was, but it was exactly because of her low-key dressing that caused many people who walked past them to gaze at her with measuring eyes. That face of hers had received exceptional love from the Creator himself where even without the slightest powder or rouge, she completely brought down all the other carefully and exquisitely made-up beautiful-looking women to look plain as dust. But miraculously today, no one came up to try to strike up a conversation with her. It was most probably due to the fact that though the little beauty was exceptionally stunning, but why did it seem that there was a strange sort of pressure emanating strangely out from her? Which kept people watchful and wary. Qin Bei looked at the young lady beside him who was looking rather distracted. He hesitated for a moment before he stopped and turned his wheelchair around to open his mouth to call out, Qin Yu. She had already gotten used to hearing him call her sis over time and suddenly hearing him call her name. Qin Yu raised up her eyebrow in surprise. What? Just what could have happened that you cannot tell me about it? Qin Bei asked with his brows creased up, a little displeased. For the past few days, you've been going around like you've lost your soul all the time, and you have not even been tending to your herb beds for several days. Don't you realize that many of those herbs would wither and die if they are not watered with spirit ichor? And I was wondering when you will come to notice it, but you've not said a single word about it even when a large patch of them died out. That was something that had never happened before. Qin Yu had always liked to leisurely fiddle around among the plants and all those herbs had thrived exceptionally well under her care. All those miraculous elixirs and divine herbs they sell for sky-high prices out there did not even have half of the effects of the herbs in her herb garden, and even when he came to accidentally cause a few leaves to drop from the plants, that evil-hearted young lady would then come over smilingly to him, to dump that disgusting toad into his arms to punish him. Chapter 49 3. Weapon Spirit Awakens HM. My herb garden died. Qin Yu's face was flabbergasted. It seemed like she really had not noticed it in the past few days. She had always tended the garden very carefully and now that it died, saying that she did not feel the pain was not possible. Her slender fingers massaged the area in between her brows, where it had knitted up tightly together in frustration. Why had she turned to become so weak after being reborn? To think that she would become so fearful of a mere unidentified danger. That was just laughable. Within her body at that moment, a golden little snake lay coiled up quietly in a corner. From its original body size of being about as thick as an infant's arm, it had come to grow by quite a bit. Besides a faint golden light that emanated from its body, a layer of swirling black mist was escaping out in all directions. But in the next instant, all those black mist looked like they were being strangled and held, to let out a final scream before it disappeared completely. The golden light upon the little snake's body then grew incredibly blinding in that instant, and with strong brilliant flash lasting for a while, it then began to dim gradually. A pair of tiny eyes shaped like inverted triangles then opened slowly, the black mist within them slowly fading away. Those highly human-like eyes looked deep in thought. After a long while, a voice that felt like it came from ancient times past, wizened and with a tinge of wistfulness, it sounded, "I've returned." The expression on Qin Yu's face froze up, her phoenix-like eyes half narrowed. Hiding the surprise and delight she was feeling right at that moment, her spirit consciousness delved deep inside her body. "Little burrower. Is that you?" Completely different from that tiny little coil from before, what met her eyes was a young youth dressed in a suit of gold clothes, with a head full of golden hair, where his entire could only be described as a glitter with gold. Upon seeing her, his heart filled up with absolute delight, his pair of highly intoxicating gold and silver eyes gentle and filled with longing. At that moment, the youth did not immediately pounce right over onto her adorably like before, but seemed to have immediately grown matured. The countenance was clearly still the same, but the gaze of his eyes and the air surrounding the youth had changed very much. Qin Yu's eyes were slightly misted over, her lips slightly parted, but she was unable to say a word. The youth seemed to be able to read the millions of emotions rushing through her at that moment as he revealed a smile brighter than the sun itself. The figure of the youth flashed and he appeared right beside the young lady in the next instant with one knee on the ground, to lift up her hand in devotion as he pressed it to the side of his face, like this was the first time they were meeting each other. "My most beloved and honored mistress, my name is Zhongmai, and from today henceforth, I am bound to mistress in blood, never to leave in life or in death." Qin Yu almost shed a tear right at that moment, but she quickly suppressed the surge of emotions inside her, to turn all the millions of things she wanted to say into just 4 words. "Good that you're back." Zhang Mai's stern and serious demeanor only lasted for a short time and he reverted back to his wacky self, his handsome face almost coming to stick right up against Qin Yu. "Mistress, you were actually so moved when you saw me that you cried? Although mistress looks very beautiful when you shed tears as well, it hurts my heart to see that." Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. EU. Although not human, but the weapon spirit's transformation was undoubtedly perfect. Regardless whether it was his body or expression, they were both lively and very authentic. At such close distance, the long and curly lashes on the youth's eyes then fluttered, looking so very adorable. Qin Yu did not know whether to laugh or to cry as she pushed the youth's face away. "Tell me. Why have you recovered all of a sudden? Since you're able to take human form, it seems like your spirit body's restoration was very successful. But from what I remember, the elixirs I cultivated have not reached such a heaven-defying stage." "Who says they haven't?" Zhang Mai arched up an eyebrow. "My mistress is the most excellent elixir cultivator under the entire heavens." "Stop all your flippant talk." Qin Yu rolled her eyes at him, her long phoenix-like eyes looking at him appraisingly, and then seemed to see through him somewhat. "Could you have come to gain something that nourished you greatly?" Chapter 50. 1. The All Saints' Day begins. Zhang Mai felt a shiver run through him. He really has the smartest mistress under these heavens. The pair of gold and silver eyes looked around and he was thinking to just brush aside the entire matter quickly when he met the young lady's pair of eyes that were looking at him with a mirthless smile, who made him then spill everything out. Including the fact that that strange pair of eyes had helped him to capture a powerful human spirit. In their previous life, Zhang Mai had never devoured any other spirit before. Because he was a living spirit born from the burial soul arts itself and he was already powerful enough by himself, where he had not needed to devour any of those little low-leveled and weak spirits at all. But when Qin Yu died unexpectedly when she was caught in a crisis, Zhang Mai sustained great injury to his vital energy together with his mistress, and was assaulted by an unknown danger. In order to protect Qin Yu's spirit from dispersing, he used up his last remaining sliver of spirit essence, and became so weak he turned back into his original form. And after he devoured that human spirit, Zhang Mai had felt a cohesion so comforting like he had never felt before, like he had been born like that. He was originally not human, and now he seemed to have gained a sliver of human compassion, possessing complicated emotions that many weapon spirits had never possessed before. It had felt like he had been born to devour spirits, and just like now, he felt that must become more powerful than he had been in his past life. Looks like the Qin family from my previous life holds many more secrets that I do not know about. Qin Yu let out a laugh, the gaze of her phoenix-like eyes deepening, her exquisite and peerlessly beautiful countenance taking on a menacing tinge. There were many things that would have to wait till the day she becomes strong enough, before she would come to understand fully. Now that her weapon spirit had come awake, the speed of her cultivation's progress would increase by half, and she would be able to fight her way back there one day. Zhang Mai was startled by the murder that had risen so suddenly in the young lady, but that intense emotion quelled down very quickly, and it was only when he did not notice anything peculiar anymore that he was able to set his mind at ease. It seemed like the hot-blooded recklessness from the past could no longer be seen in Qin Yu, who was now reliving another life, and hidden deep in her bones were just devious farsightedness and calm. To an outsider, seeing the young lady with a countenance of such peerless beauty sitting in a quiet corner, the corners of her mouth curled up with a faint and imperceptible smile as she sat beside a youth who had his back facing everyone, they would think that they must be discussing something interesting. But only Qin Bei knew that the young lady had been like this for a good while. Having been with her for 6 years, although it could not be said that he understood her completely, but he would at least know that she was currently not aware and conscious of her surroundings, and if he were to leave her side at that moment, something might just happen to her. Fortunately Qin Yu recovered after a while. She then blinked her eyes at him to indicate that she was all right. If it was not because she had been so astounded that little Burrow had suddenly awoken, she would not have done something so dangerous as to immediately make her consciousness leave her body. If any wild and wandering spirit were to spot her vacant and uninhabited shell, it would really cause her a whole lot of trouble. Announcing the arrival of the Water Edge Kingdom's Duke of Vast Seas and the 9th Princess. Announcing the arrival of the Martial Land Kingdom's 7th Prince. After the shrill and high-pitched voice rang out, a rustle of commotion suddenly rose up outside the hall. Although the Duke of Vast Seas' fame as the god of slaughter was well known to everyone, but his extraordinary silver hair and deep green eyes were just as exceptional and mysterious as well. People had said that he was incredibly hideous looking, and that was why he did not dare to show his face to people, and there were also people who had claimed that his looks were like those of a god in the heavens, unmatchedly handsome. Although they were all just rumors, but the people just could not hold back their curiosity towards that man. This was a man that even the people of the Water Edge Kingdom seldom saw, not to mention such a faraway kingdom like the Green Wave. The 9th Princess Yuxian Yen was also a rare beauty throughout the lands, her hair falling down to her hips, mixed with several locks of wispy blue that were weaved into 2 thin braids on the sides, her large bright pair of azure eyes the sparkling with the colors of the sea, incredibly attractive. Although she was only 14 years old, the figure of her body was incomparably great, curvy and slender, a blue chiffon dress worn over that petite frame, her delicate beauty making her look like a sprite descended into the mortal realm. Chapter 50. 2. The All Saints' Day begins, and there were the twins from the Martial Land Kingdom's Imperial family, birthed by the Martial Land Kingdom's Imperial consort. The 2 of them were supposed to be born at the same time, but one came out at the very break of dawn while the other rolled about in the mother's tummy till night fell before deciding to come out, causing the 2 of them to have 2 completely different personalities. One was sunny and handsome, like a son of the sun, the other dark and eccentric, like a hellish demon spawn. The pair of unusual twins were famous throughout the Martial Land Kingdom as the younger brother who was born at night always made use of his face which looked exactly the same as his elder brother's to commit all kinds of evil, but as he knew and imitated his elder brother's demeanor and actions so well, no one could tell them apart properly. Moreover, the two of them were the Martial Land Kingdom Imperial family's most preeminent and outstanding princes, who possessed strong powers, belonging to one among the three great sects, the Carefree Valley, highly elevating their status. The twins who came in together with Qin Yi Li and his people had one wearing a sapphire blue brocade robe, a handsome countenance, his facial features carrying a warm smile that put people at ease. The other prince was dressed in full dark green, and though it could be seen that he carried a similar-looking countenance, but his demeanor and the air around him seemed somewhat different. Very few people were able to carry off such a challenging shade of green and look good in it, but that prim and proper attire when worn upon his body seemed to lend to it a sense of restrained ascetic beauty. With one look, people were able to see that he must be the seventh prince who was born at night, the air around him feeling quite a bit colder. It was also the first time that Qin Yu was seeing the twins and she had felt that it was rather interesting. She looked at them a little while longer and then said with a laugh, "They really look exactly the same. But the seventh prince seems to look like there is more in him than he shows. Had he been born with that body constitution or was he cultivating some secret dark arts? That sinister air that was emanating out from him was impossible to hide. Mistress, that person is a highly rarely seen prodigy who holds both light and darkness in one body. Don't just see him as being sinister and terrifying to look at, but it is only because he still has not learnt to fuse those two opposing types of techniques cohesively. Wait till he comes to comprehend the secrets in what he holds and it will be hard to find one who can match him throughout this low-level lands." The golden-haired boy inside her seemed to have discovered a peculiar existence through Qin Yu's eyes and he could not help but open his mouth to explain. It could be because his attention had been drawn by that highly peculiar prince as he then came to notice that man with a full head of silver hair standing right at the forefront of the group. His long narrow eyes then immediately blinked in surprise, and then blinked again and again. Mistress, why do I feel that man over there is just so familiar? It seems like I have met him somewhere before. It's that one. Why are you sitting all the way over here? Yan Shicheng had come walking over out of the blue. I've made arrangements for your seats. This area is where all the smaller family clans and disciples from off branches sit. Having her conversation interrupted, Qin Yu then gave up on it to turn to Yan Shicheng with a smile. Thank you, big brother. I was thinking that this area was more quiet, but since you've made arrangements for our seats, then let's go there. Shicheng, these two are. Yu Jingjue had been chatting with Yan Shicheng earlier before this, but when Yan Shicheng had suddenly come walking here, he had just followed behind. I have not introduced them. These are my younger siblings, Yan Qin Yu and Yan Qin Bei. This person here is the left Prime Minister's third young master, Yu Jingjue. Yan Shicheng went on to say. Because Qin Bei was sitting down, Yu Jingjue's eyes had immediately just turned his gaze to look at Qin Yu. And it was only when he came close that he discovered that the young lady had looks as outstanding as a celestial being. If it was said that Yan Ning Luo was an untainted and coldly aloof mystical lady of the 9 heavens, then this young girl here would be the most enchanting and alluring beauty that hooked a person's very soul, but under that peerlessly beautiful countenance, was a smile that was so pure and flawless, without being lofty. Chapter 50. 3. The All Saints' Day begins. Self-proclaimed to have completely studied 3,000 beauties, the playboy Yu Jingjue was completely mesmerized for the first time in his life as he stood there staring. It was only after Yan Shicheng beside him called him a few times that he came back to his senses. Yu Jingjue coughed awkwardly a couple of times and then turned his eyes away from her. Yan Shicheng held his fist pressed against his lips to stifle a laugh. Compared to the time when he first saw Qin Yu, isn't this fella a little too weak-willed? How could he embarrass himself like this? Cough, I had not thought there would be such a beauty in the Eternal Peace Duke's manner. Yu Jingzhuo cleared his throat, before he then gave a handsome and suave smile. As for Qin Bei at the side who had been completely disregarded. So his presence before people is always so insignificant. Qin Yu cast a languid and indifferent glance towards Yu Jingzhuo before she then said perfunctorily, "Thanks for the praise." The atmosphere grew awkward, and Yan Shicheng then quickly led Qin Yu and Qin Bei to their allocated seats, where he did not interact with them much after that. After that whole incident, Yu Jingzhuo was a little depressed as he opened his mouth to ask. "Why do I feel that this younger sister of yours is even colder and more aloof than Yan Ning Luo? Is that so? Qin Yu is usually very well behaved, and isn't all that cold to people." Yan Shicheng said with a smile, and his gaze then turned a little mocking. "It is most probably because you were staring at her like an ignorant fool when seeing her for the first time, which caused her to dislike you." Yu Jingzhuo did not have a response to that. Damn! Did he really make such a big fool of himself just now? That was just too much. How could he have left such a bad first impression in front of a beauty? He was suddenly feeling highly frustrated. For this year's All Saints' Day, not only people from the other two kingdoms had come, even the three great sects had each sent one heavyweight representative, to be judges that would select the male saint and female saint for this All Saints' Day festival. This year's All Saints' Day was expected to be the most exciting one ever. Not only had the always heard but never seen god of slaughter, the Duke of Vast Seas come, the great beauty famous throughout the lands, Uxin Yen, the highly eccentric but highly powerful twin princes, and many other capable pugilists from the three great sects were also here, so it was guaranteed that it would be a grand and magnificent sight. In the middle of the Imperial Palace's Grand Hall, an enormously wide round arena has been built, a strong and tough spirit energy isolation barrier set up around the platform. Once a duel began, no one will be able to interfere. Compared to the Martial Land Kingdom, which was a highly warlike kingdom, the Green Wave Kingdom also had quite a number of scholars and men of literature and the arts. Although one's level of cultivation granted them freedom of passage through these lands, but without a little knowledge and a splotch of ink in their tummies, if they did not possess any literary or artistic talent to show to people, they would still be mocked and ridiculed. Hence, for this year's All Saints' Day festival, they had added a literary segment to the competition. Before the duels, they had already carried out one round of filtering and they were very strict. Many members of noble families who came all prepared were swept right out of the competition right from the beginning, and there was no room for negotiation at all, not even when they tried to bribe with money. Read latest chapters at Wuxia World. It was no joke. People from the other kingdoms and the three great sects were here this time. If any one of them were to mess up and cause any mishap to occur during such a momentous occasion that embarrassed the Green Wave Emperor, they would definitely not be able to live peacefully henceforth. Big Brother Yili, isn't that the person we saw at the Afterlife Loft back then? To think that he has come here as well. Uxin Yan's gaze suddenly caught sight of a familiar figure, and she could not help but whisper to the man beside her to tell him about it. Hearing that, Qin Yili raised his eyes up to look. The man on the opposite side seemed to feel someone's gaze upon him, and he then stretched his hand up to wave at them, his eyes just as charming as before, tugging at people's heartstrings. The surprising thing was, he was seated among the panel of judges. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.